The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Thom Hartmann University Book Club reading today from Screwed, The Undeclared War Against the Middle Class and What We Can Do About It. This is from one of the last chapters, chapter 13. It's titled Setting the Rules of the Game, and the subchapter Gaming the System. If government can create conditions that cause a middle class to emerge by implementing fair rules for business, progressive taxation, free public education, the opposite is also true. Government can create a corporatocracy by deregulating business, by cutting taxes on extreme wealth, and by privatizing as much of the commons as possible. Conservatives call this starving the beast. Here's how you starve the beast. You put through tax cuts for the rich, which cuts back the revenues of the federal government to the point that if you got rid of all the social programs, you'd have a balanced budget. No more Social Security, no more spending for education, no more spending for Medicare and Medicaid. Let the government simply keep the armies, prisons, and police. Let's shrink government. That's their philosophy. When you cut all those social programs, you lose the middle class, and in its place create a very small wealthy elite and a large underclass of starvation wage workers. You lose democracy and instead create corporatocracy. You change the rules of the game. We the people lose and the feudal lords win. Cons have been winning this particular game of starve the beast since Reagan first started seriously playing it in 1981. They've done it in large part by lying to the American people. And they've had to do that because if they told the truth, the majority of Americans would throw them out of office. This is, after all, still a democracy. If the majority of us agree to get rid of Social Security so that only the wealthy can have retirement benefits and the old are left to fend for themselves, so be it. If a guy breaks his neck and can't work and the majority of us decide not to help people who are disabled, and as a result he has to beg on the street, well, we can democratically decide to screw him and ourselves. But the conservatives are not having this debate in an open and honest fashion. They're not asking we the people if we want to get rid of, for example, the Head Start program. They could ask, do we want to invest in our youth or not? We know that if we invest in educating the very young, fewer of them will become criminals. It will save us money over the long term. But the majority will say, but the majority of us say, no, we would rather pay $50,000 to imprison them later than pay $300 to put them in a Head Start now. If we said that, then that's fine. It's a democracy. But that's not the way the cons are doing it. Instead of explaining why it would be better for Americans to give all their money to the corporate elite, they're giving huge tax cuts to the rich while pretending that the tax cuts benefit all Americans. Instead of arguing that Americans should not expect the right to health care or security in their own old age, they are promoting a government crisis by handing to the rich the money we're borrowing from China, Japan, and Korea in the name of our grandkids. They're borrowing so much money from these countries that if they so much as blink, our currency could crash. And that's just what the most ideological of the conservative elite want. They want an economic crisis because they figure that's the only way they can force a cut in spending on social programs. In 2004, they thought that they had starved the beast enough, and they sent Bush out on the campaign trail to advocate getting rid of Social Security, privatizing it, putting it in the hands of Wall Street. But it didn't work. Turns out we, the people, apparently like Social Security. So the cons went back to starving the beast. Bush instead passed a new series of tax cuts with more to follow. The cons are trying to play the game so that the rich benefit while the rest of us lose out. They get tax cuts, we get program cuts. That's not a free market. That's a market that's being created for the benefit of the rich at the expense of the middle class. The question Americans have faced since the first arguments between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton in the 1780s was whether the game of business should be played with the primary goal of enriching the few, or, while allowing the few to enrich themselves, enhancing the quality of the life of the many. The cons suggest that if the rich win first, benefits will trickle down to the rest of us. Protecting workers, they say, will produce abnormalities and dislocations from a so-called free market. For example, they suggest that when minimum wages are fixed by government and labor can lawfully bargain to increase wages by increasing scarcity of labor through union actions, the result is an increase in prices, ultimately hurting the working person. But the economists they often cite in this thinking, David Ricardo, disagreed that raising wages first increased prices. He noted, quote, "On the contrary, a rise of wages from the circumstance of the laborer being more liberally rewarded, or from a difficulty of procuring the necessities on which wages are expended, does not, except in some instances, produce the effect of raising price, but has a great effect in lowering profits." End of quote. In other words, all that talk about keeping wages down to keep prices down is a smokescreen. Business owners want to keep wages down to keep profits up. And when wages go down, profits do indeed go up. American wages have been falling steadily since Reagan first reintroduced conservative economics in 1980. And American corporations are generally more profitable than they've been in decades. In part, this is not only because wages are going down within the United States, but also because U.S.-level wages are being replaced by India and China-level wages through offshoring and outsourcing. But offshoring isn't a problem for American workers, the cons shout. It's the increase in productivity. American businesses need fewer workers because of automation. This is a tragic lie, and it's been bought hook, line, and sinker by most American politicians and even some economists. The book is Screwed.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Alarming parallels of history escalate, tweets the Anne Frank Center. Yes, it's a verified Twitter account. It really is the Anne Frank Center. Anne Frank, the young Jewish girl, who a teenager, from preteen to teenage years, hiding in an attic in as I recall, it was Amsterdam. Might have been one of the other cities, though, in the Netherlands, as the Nazis took over Holland, and left behind her famous diary and all that sort of thing. So the center is carrying on her work. Alarming parallels of history escalate. Number one, the president creates his own media. Clearly the parallel they're making is to Germany in the 30s, right? I mean, the Anne Frank Center is not making a parallel to, I don't know, the rise of FDR. I mean, this is, okay, the president creates his own media, number one. Number two, he exploits youth at a rally. Number three, he endorses police brutality. Number four, he demonizes people who believe, look, or love differently. Number five, he strips vulnerable people of their families, jobs, and ability to live. Number six, he believes Congress should change its rules to give him more power. The Anne Frank Center for Mutual Respect believes never again to any people, and now. So here we have, I mean, you know, the president, he's hanging out with Eric Prince, talking about completely privatizing the Afghan war, right? Turn the whole thing over to the contractors. Hey, you know, give me $250,000 per soldier. I can take care of this. The British East India Company. I mean, there's a long history, right, of privatized war. There was the first Anglo-Mysore War in 1766, lasted for 4 years. The first Anglo-Maratha War, 1775. The second Anglo-Mysore. These are all wars between the East India Company and India. The second Anglo-Mysore War, 1780. The third was in 1789. The fourth was in 1798. The second Anglo-Maratha War was 1803. The Anglo-Gorkha War, 1814. You know, it goes on. The Anglo-Sikh War, 1848 to 49. Those are just the Anglo-Indian wars. I mean, those are just the, you know, the privatized wars, a very small slice of it. So, you know, Trump is like not exploring brand new territory, but this is for lack of a more appropriate word, this is evil stuff. Saying war, the thing that we all should work on avoiding, should be privatized and put into the profit system, which, by the way, this is what Dwight Eisenhower warned us about. The entire military-industrial complex is about the privatization and the profitization of war. And Eric Prince, Betsy DeVos's brother, and Donald Trump getting together and saying, oh, yeah, hey, great idea. Let's do this. And that way, the United States will no longer have dead soldiers coming home, right? We'll just have contractors who were, you know, paid $150,000, $250,000 a year for their service to our country in Afghanistan, coming home in body bags. But hey, they signed non-compete agreements, they signed non-disclosure agreements, they signed gag orders, they can't tell anybody, so you'll never know how many dead people are coming back, right? Unless one of them happens to be, you know, living on your city block and the neighbors tell you. This is bizarre, which raises a question. I mean, Trump is doing this. I've got a few other things here I want to share with you about what, you know, what Trump is up to, you know, retweeting classified information and all kinds of stuff. But what it all comes down to is one essential question. And it's an essential question that is being asked today in an op-ed in the Washington Post by Richard Cohen. And the question that Richard Cohen asks is, who's worse for the nation, Donald Trump or Mike Pence? Now think about that for a minute. How do you make this, you know, the classic decision making, you know, you take a legal pad and run a line down the middle, and on the left side you say, you know, for, and on the right side you say against, or vice versa. And then, you know, what, Trump or Pence, right? Which is worse for the nation? Up until about a month ago, I was firmly of the opinion that Pence was worse for the nation because Trump is not an ideologue. And although he's beholden to a few billionaires, Robert Mercer and his daughter Rebecca, Shelley Adelson, he's got a few billionaires who've helped him out. And of course, the Koch brothers and the Koch network, had they not worked really, really hard to elect Republicans all across the country, wouldn't have been doing the get out the vote efforts that led to Donald Trump being in the White House. So, you know, he owes it to them, but he doesn't owe it to them the way Mike Pence does. Mike Pence owes basically his entire political career to petro-billionaire oligarchs. Donald Trump doesn't. So up until a month or so ago, I was personally of the opinion that having Mike Pence as president would be a worse thing than having Donald Trump as president. Because Mike Pence is, you know, he has been a political creature his entire life. Other than a few years when he was a talk show host, Mike Pence is all about being the elected toady for very rich people. That's what he's done his entire life. That and being the elected toady for the American Taliban, the so-called Christian Taliban, you know, the Falwell crowd and the, you know, these you know, hardcore right wing, take millions and millions of federal dollars guys who then, you know, are all upset about the federal government, et cetera. But now I'm changing my mind very reluctantly. My thought was Trump is so incompetent that he can't really get us into too much trouble. And Pence is very competent, and so he could get a lot done very quickly and really damage the United States, using his libertarian ideology that he is, dancing to the tune of the billionaires on behalf of. But now that I've watched Trump interact with North Korea, with Russia, with Saudi Arabia, with Israel, with Germany, with Mexico, with the Philippines, Duterte, in every case, Trump is making the worst kind of rookie mistakes. He's just like, he could lead us into World War III. He could tweet us into World War III. And it's like he doesn't even care. I mean, this morning, Nikki Haley was on Fox and Friends, and Fox News had published a leak, something Donald Trump wants to put journalists in jail for. Fox News had published a leak which included classified information. They asked Nikki Haley about it, and Nikki Haley said, we shouldn't be talking about that. That's classified. So Fox and Friends tweets it, and guess who retweets it? Donald Trump. In essence, verifying to the world this classified information. Now, that's not only wrong, it's probably illegal on the part of both Fox and Trump. But whether it's wrong or illegal, it's dangerous. This is think back to World War I. I realize none of us were alive for World War I, right? Anybody who was around at the beginning of World War I who saw the build up to it in the late 1910s and the early 19-teens, tensions around the world, nations coming to all these bilateral agreements to if you get attacked, then I'm attacked, then I'll fight on your behalf, and all this kind of stuff that everybody thought would ensure peace in the world, actually guaranteed a world war as the result of Archduke Ferdinand being assassinated in Sarajevo. And nobody was expecting this. In fact, to this day, nobody can give you a really good reason why World War I was fought, other than the fact that once it started, it spiraled out of control because of all these bilateral agreements, these mutual defense agreements. Well, those agreements are in places now, times 10. And so if, for example, Donald Trump attacks North Korea preemptively, North Korea reaches out to China and says, we have a mutual defense agreement. China attacks the United States. We're now at war with China. China goes to Russia and says, hey, you're on I think they have a mutual defense agreement. If not there's others. India and Pakistan get into it. India comes to us. Pakistan goes to Russia or China. I mean, it's just pretty soon you've got the whole damn world at war. Because Trump is so incompetent. So I have come to the conclusion that, I just up until the last couple of weeks, I've been kind of cautious about calling for the impeachment of Donald Trump. I figured, just let the process take its course. Bob Mueller is going to find out if he's done anything wrong, and if he has, they're going to nail him for it. What's the old saying? A grand jury can indict a ham sandwich. Well, Donald Trump is about as close to a ham sandwich as you can get these days. And I just, it's on white bread at that, right? And so I've come to the conclusion, personally, that Pence is probably a safer bet for the United States than Donald Trump. And that frankly troubles me. But, and looking at it from a partisan point of view, I think Pence is also weaker electorally. I think Trump has built a base of people who don't trust either party, frankly. And it's a not inconsequential base. So what are your thoughts on this?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more right after this.
And welcome back. Jesse, watching Free Speech TV in Miami, Florida. Hey, Jesse, what's on your mind today?
Hey, hi, Tom. Everything that you've been talking about. Wow. Hey, but look, the one thing, you know, we headed for a conflict, and we set up for it through the class war. So we got rid of, you know, idolizing money. What do you think we can move to next to prevent the big conflict we headed for? Thanks.
Well, I think number one, we need to start idolizing community, Jesse. These are the core values of the New Deal, that everybody is entitled to a basic level of safety, security, and opportunity. And that has been kind of blown out of the water by Reaganomics and this massive inequality that we're experiencing right now that has never been worse in the United States except in the year 1929, which is kind of an ominous thing. So I think if we're going to stop worshiping money, and that golden calf god is being shown to have clay feet, that to mangle metaphors here, that the replacement should be each other, you know, honoring each other and building community.
Hey, can I ask you something?
Yeah.
I know you know about Bitcoin and the basic concept. And
Big corn. You're talking about industrial agriculture for high fructose corn syrup and food, animal crops?
The Bitcoin, the computer money, Bitcoin.
Oh, Bitcoin. I'm sorry. Yeah, got it.
Yeah. The basic concept, the guy did it pretty much to get rid of the nation state's control of currency. He wanted to bring it to the people through the computer using mathematical calculations.
Right.
So you just extend that principle, just what you talked, saying we need to become a community again. You think that concept of Bitcoin could translate to the community, whereas people could say, okay, we don't have Greenspan yelling, saying, well, this is a value between human beings. Whereas if me and you text each other and we could put more value on that text than somebody at the Federal Reserve. You follow me on this? I
do. I see two pieces to it, Jesse. One is that Bitcoin has never actually been used as a currency for any country, and it's definitely never been used as the reserve currency for a country or group of countries. I'm not sure that it's even a possibility, although I'm no monetary expert. But the other thing is that Bitcoin relies on a technology called blockchain, which is, as you pointed out, a computer formula, essentially, an algorithm that has a very, very high level of safety and security, built into it. It's very, very hard to imitate, replicate, or hack Bitcoins. And so that's a technology that I think possibly could work for voting. You know, if we wanted to come up with a national online voting system or a national voting system, and I realize as soon as I say online voting system, Greg Palast and Brad Friedman's heads explode, and I don't mean it to do that. I'm not a fan of online voting, period.
Well,
but, this is a technology that might be useful. Maybe voting machines, I don't know, whatever. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, we trusted money beyond counterfeit.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Jesse, I got to run. Thanks for the call. It's a thought-provoking question and a good one. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Heather with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving of donations, volunteering, or even spreading the word, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to sustain for more than 20 years. Now, you can give to Free Speech TV through the Branch of Gratitude. This program is a sustainable way to give that reduces waste through paper mailing, postage, and staff hours. By choosing to participate in the Branch of Gratitude, you are joining hands with the socially conscious community and sending a message to the world that Free Speech TV is not only here to stay, it is here to thrive. Please call 877-378-8669 or go online to freespeech.org. Make a difference and join the Branch of Gratitude today.
So Richard Cohen asking the question in today's Washington Post, who's worse for the nation, Donald Trump or Mike Pence? He points out that, when the New York Times reported that Mike Pence is already running for president, he's got a super PAC, he's got staff, he's visiting Iowa, he's doing all the things that Republicans do, for that matter, most Democrats do when they're intending to run for president. And Pence goes, that's reprehensible, that's disgraceful, that's offensive. Really? It's offensive to run for president? It's disgraceful to report that you're running for president? Really what he's saying is, Donald, don't pay attention to the New York Times. Don't read that article, please. Don't get upset with me, Donald. Please don't get upset with me. Don't send me out there with Michael Flynn, please. That's what's going on. But as Richard Cohen says, Pence is not a man to look a gift horse in the mouth. He's got his eye on 2020. And he adds Trump is a menace. He's ignorant. He's chaotic. His saving grace, however, is his incompetence. And see, that was where I was at a month or so ago before North Korea started firing off missiles with some scary precision and ability. Cohen says, on the other hand, his most significant and appalling contribution has been to normalize lying as an ordinary tool of the presidency. He's talking about Donald Trump, obviously. Although Mike Pence lies a lot, too. Mike Pence claims, it was Mike Pence who wrote op-eds and told us back when in around 2000 when he was working for the tobacco industry that you can't get lung cancer from smoking, or that smoking doesn't directly cause lung cancer. It was Mike Pence who, the whole periods for Pence thing in Indiana. If you have a miscarriage, you have to report yourself to the police and you have to pay $5,000 for a funeral. It was Mike Pence who, in 2002, went to the floor of the House of Representatives to say that evolution was merely a theory. Right. And then Mike Pence says, and I think this is the most important thing about Cohen's critique of Pence, that he's an insanely, shockingly, absolutely hypocrite. In fact, Cohen says Pence is all faith and no morality. In other words, he goes out there and he says, I'm a super Christian, right? We got to stop these women from having abortions. I'm a super Christian. And as a super Christian, I'm not going to say anything about our president trashing brown people and Mexicans and Muslims and the disabled. I'm not going to say anything about Donald Trump making fun of disabled reporters or talking about grabbing women by the crotch. I'm not going to say, well, maybe he said something about that once. But basically, Mike Pence has been an absolute toady for Donald Trump. And he's trying to continue that process. Do we really? Here we've got a choice. You can have in the White House a New York real estate developer who may have connections to the mob, domestic or foreign, and who it seems literally cannot go through an entire day without telling a lie, typically a self-serving lie. Do you want that guy in the White House who doesn't know what's going on, who the Joint Chiefs, the only way, and the intelligence services, the only way they can get him to read a memo is to make sure that his name is in every paragraph? Do you want that guy in the White House? Or do you want the Christian Taliban in the White House who wants to outlaw abortion all across the United States, who wants to outlaw much birth control, who wants to force women when they have miscarriages to report themselves to their local police department, who says evolution isn't real, that we should look to the Bible for our science, and who claims that climate change doesn't exist? Well, they're both claiming that, but Trump at least is a little more cynical about it. Who's worse, in your opinion?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And I'm telling you, this is a decision that not only are voters having to make and Democrats having to make, but Republicans are struggling with.
Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Crash of 2016, one of my favorites. In her writings, this is from page 62, by the way, a middle-class primer is the chapter title. In her writings, which have become foundational for libertarian theology, author Ayn Rand suggested that the only purpose of government should be to prevent oppression by force. What she neglected to consider was all the force inherent in nature. If you're hungry, there is the force of biology. If you're homeless, you confront the force of winds, storms, ice, and rain. If you're sick, you confront the ravages and force of disease. These were the forces that provoked the first governments, the first communities, the first clans and tribes, the first nation states. It's easy for libertarian elitists, such as multimillionaire TV talking heads or college kids reading Atlas Shrugged, to talk about how there should be no government beyond police, the army, and the courts. They all have enough resources that they don't need to deal with the forces of raw nature. And that explains why billionaires would bankroll libertarian-leaning think tanks that will, when the crash comes with its full force, tell us it was caused by big government. However, in the real world, humans must confront both nature and other humans, which is why we create governments and why we create economies. But it wasn't until 1776 when Thomas Jefferson placed John Locke's right to life, liberty, and property, or replaced it, with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that the idea of a large class of working people have the ability to pursue happiness, the middle class. It wasn't until 1776 that that was even seriously considered as a cornerstone obligation to government. This is also the first time in history that the word happiness had ever appeared in any nation's formative documents, as Jefferson wrote in 1817 to Dr. John Manners, quote, "The evidence of this natural right, like that to our right of life, liberty, the use of our faculties, the pursuit of happiness is not left to the feeble and sophisticated investigations of reason, but is impressed on the sense of every man." As Jefferson realized, with no government interference by setting the rules of the game of business and fair taxation, there could be no broad middle class, maybe a sliver of small business and artisans, but the vast majority of us would be the working poor under the yoke of elites. The economic royalists know this, which gets to the root of why they set out to destroy government's involvement in the economy. After all, in a middle-class economy, they may have to give up some of their power, and some of the higher end of their wealth may even be redistributed, horrors of horrors, for schools, parks, libraries, and other things that support a healthy middle-class society but are not needed by the rich, who live in a parallel but separate world from the rest of us. As Jefferson laid out in his 1816 letter to Samuel Kercheval, a totally free market where corporations reign supreme, just like the oppressive governments of old, could transform America, quote, until the bulk of the society is reduced to be mere automatons of misery, to have no sensibilities left but for sinning and suffering. Then begins indeed the bella omnium in omnia, which some philosophers observing to be so general in this world have mistaken it for the natural instead of the abusive state of man. Although this may come as a sudden realization to many, we've really known it all our lives. In fact, in the 6,000-year history of the civilized world, a middle class emerging in any nation has been such a rarity as to be largely historically invisible. The United States has had two great periods of what we today call a middle class. The first was from the 1700s to the mid-1800s and was fueled by virtually free land for settlers, stolen from the Indians, and free labor, slavery in the South and indentured immigrants in the North. The result was, as de Tocqueville pointed out, the most well-educated, politically active, middle-class, non-aristocrats in the world. The second period didn't take hold until after World War II, during my dad's lifetime. Unlike the first, which was fueled by free land and slaves, the second had to be carefully constructed with specific and what some might define as socialist policies put in place during the New Deal, which asserted more democratic control over the economy and workplace in order to keep the economic royalists in check. To both stimulate and balance the domestic economy, FDR reinstituted progressive taxation, which gave workers more to spend and gave the rich an incentive to pay their workers better to maintain a stable workplace, since if they took the money themselves, it would just mostly go to taxes, thus stimulating demand for more goods and services. Progressive taxation has a long history. As Jefferson said in a 1785 letter to James Madison, quote, "Another means of silently lessening the inequality of property is to exempt from taxation all below a certain point and to tax the higher portions of property in geometrical progression as they rise." FDR eventually hiked the top income tax rate paid by the super rich in America to 90%. This had a twofold effect. First, it held income inequality in check and ushered in an era of equal income and a growth among all classes. Unlike the Gilded Age, when the economy grew at a blistering pace, but the gains were afforded only to the robber barons, the period between 1947 and 1980 saw unparalleled equitable growth. During these 30-plus years, the poorest fifth in America saw a 116% increase in their incomes. The middle fifth, 111% increase. Top 5% only saw an 85% increase. All income classes shared in the prosperity of the times when the top marginal income tax rate was above 70%. The second effect of a high income tax rate was to bring stability to the economy. And then it goes through the whole explanation of how that worked. The book is The Crash of 2016. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And the question before us, who is worse for the United States, Trump or Pence? I mean, do we want a Christian Taliban running this country, or do we want a corrupt real estate executive running this country, an oligarch? Pence has spent his life shilling on behalf of the oligarchs. Trump is an oligarch. Which is worse? I can build a case in either direction, but the propensity of Trump to not pay attention to details like, the mental state of Kim Jong-un, when he just, when he bumbles into stuff, I just have this bull in a china shop sense about Trump that scares the heck out of me. And that's the basis of my concern that if Bob Mueller finds anything, whether it has to do with Russia or whether it has to do with oligarchs, American, Russian, Ukrainian, God only knows, odds are fairly high, in my personal opinion, just from the stuff that I've been reading in the press, that the Trump organization has, at the very least, been involved in money laundering operations, perhaps unwittingly, but unlikely, but, who knows? But if Mueller can find something that can be the basis for an impeachment action in the House of Representatives and a trial in the Senate, and we end up with President Pence, or Trump resigns, which is what I've been predicting. I've been predicting for some time now that before the end of this year, or the middle of next year at the very latest, that there will be indictments of Manafort and Flynn and probably Don Jr., and maybe Corey Lewandowski, and maybe a few of the other people close to Trump. And when those indictments happen, Trump will pardon them all, and then he will resign to avoid being attacked himself. And then Mike Pence will come in and be president. And the first thing he'll do, just like Jerry Ford did with Richard Nixon, is pardon Donald Trump. And that'll be the end of that, and we'll never hear anything more about it. That's my prediction. But if that plays out, is that good for the country or bad for the country? I was kind of gleeful is too strong, way too strong, but I was at least somewhat relieved at the incompetence of Donald Trump initially. Now I'm terrified by it. Adam in Fort Collins, Colorado. Hey, Adam, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, how's it going?
Good. Trump or Pence?
God, worse is definitely Trump.
Yeah, Chris was sitting here with me. He says this is like asking if you want to be kicked between the legs or if you want to have your hair set on fire. What's your choice?
Well, for one thing, we have only a certain amount of fear we can instill into Pence, because a lot of the things he talks about as far as religion, legislation can't be written based off religion. So, I mean, we can kind of put some of the fears to rest. But with Trump, we've got a bigger problem, and that is he's propagandized a new group of, well, not even a new group of people, just this huge group of people through that Cambridge Analytica deal that he did to run his campaign.
Yeah, this is the micro-targeting database company that Robert Mercer owns or started or something, and that micro-targeted people during the election, particularly through Facebook for advertising, and is also micro-targeting voters, as I recall.
Yep.
In fact,
So, I
they
mean,
took
you've
that
got a
over
lot
to
of
Britain
people-
for Brexit, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
now-
therefore, the bottom line, Adam, do you think is more dangerous for the United States, Trump or Pence?
Definitely, it'd have to be Trump because everybody's used to the left and right, the religious, on the right. You know what I mean. Everyone's used to our cat and dog fight. But when it comes to this new takeover over the social media, this is completely different.
Yeah.
The old cat and dog fight can't even compare.
Yeah, it's sort of like when I'm increasingly disliking Hitler analogies, but maybe Mussolini. I don't know that much about the rise of Mussolini in Italy, but when Hitler came along, he was perceived as neither the left nor right initially, but rather as this brand new populist phenomena, and that's kind of how Trump has been pitched to us. And yeah, I get it. Okay, Adam, thank you for the call. Thanks for sharing your opinion. John in Philadelphia. Hey, John, your thoughts?
That's definitely a tough choice between Trump and Pence. I really think it's time to address more of the potential constitutional crisis with the failed balance of powers.
How so?
Specifically with declaring war.
Well, that's been going on
from Congress.
That's been going on since the 50s.
And I think it's time to really talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought we were going to have a conversation about it after Vietnam, and another war that was literally never declared. We have not declared a war since World War II.
I'm younger than you. I thought it would happen with Clinton with the actions that happened in '98.
Yeah, in Bosnia and Serbia?
Yes. Not just Bosnia, Serbia, also Afghanistan and Africa.
Oh, yeah. And the first Gulf War, under Bush, the elder.
Well, none of these go through Congress.
Or if they do in ways that are largely cosmetic, authorization to use military force. Excuse me, how is that not a declaration of war? And declaration of war has a much higher threshold. But yeah, I think that's so. What is that?
Representatives are on the line for that.
No, I get that.
I can go to my congressman and say, "Hey, we should not be doing this," and we get a chance every 2 years to make sure that the outcome of that doesn't put us into perpetual war.
Right, but then pretty much the only people you're voting for are Barbara Lee and Bernie Sanders. I mean, there are not a lot of members of Congress who are willing to stand up to the Pentagon. Excuse me. I completely agree with you on Congress needs to be declaring wars. I get all that. So then the question becomes, what does that have to do with who's worse for America, Trump or Pence? Because both of them, in my opinion, will exploit foreign wars for their own political advantage.
They will, but if they have to put it through Congress, it's not a knee-jerk reaction.
I see. So you're calling for the checks and balances to be restored. I get it, and I totally agree. I don't think it's going to happen, but I totally agree. John, excellent point. Carol in Monessen, Pennsylvania. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind?
Hi, thanks for taking my call. It's odd that you mentioned this morning because about 2-3 weeks ago I came to the same conclusion. And while I've never been a fan of Pence, and I'm certainly, as a Bernie supporter, not on the hard right, however, I find that the longer this administration goes on, the more unhinged this man is becoming. And I'm starting to be very afraid of him.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid of Pence. I mean, I think Pence is sane.
Yes.
I may not like his policy.
Yeah, he's amoral, and he's the you look up a politician weasel in the dictionary, and there's a picture of Mike Pence.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean he's nuts. Trump seems to be nuts.
No, he's not nuts. And all politicians lie, and Pence is very good at that. But he's not a pathological liar, and I don't believe he has a pathological personality as Trump does.
I agree.
And I think that Trump is extremely dangerous for this country. And at least Pence has, there's something calming about his presence, whether you like him or not. He's calm. He seems to know what he's doing. I've heard him speak at the NATO summit, and he did a very good job, So I don't think he would insult all of our allies and get us into a World War III. I really don't.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I'm inclined to agree. Carol, thank you. Thank you for sharing your opinion. Bob in Roanoke, Virginia. Hey, Bob, your thoughts?
Tom, how you doing?
Good.
I think Trump is really dangerous. Up until recently, up until this morning, I actually was thinking that I did not care for Pence, and I was afraid of Pence. But I think your last caller really hit it. You know, Trump is very, very dangerous. I just finished reading this Craig Unger's article in the New Republic. Have you read that?
What's the title?
It's Trump's Russian laundromat. On the cover, it says "Married to the Mob." There's a picture of Trump with a Russian guy.
Oh yeah, I saw. You know, I read a part of that yesterday afternoon over on the New Republic website.
That article is frightening in a lot of ways because Trump is really entangled with these guys. I mean, there's so many different. They outline so many different things that have happened and so many different characters that Craig Unger introduces that Trump is just very, very involved with. I mean, and it's not even. It wasn't even like he's promoting a foreign government. It's like he's in bed with foreign mobsters. Exactly, he's in bed. He's in bed with the Russian mob, and they've got a lot of documentation, a lot of pictures. The pictures are as scary as the article.
Well, and you can go back and look at, I mean, the reporting done in New York City in the 80s and 90s about Trump and the Gotti family, or Trump and the New York mob, and, why did they make Trump Tower with concrete? Well, because apparently big mob boss was a concrete man. I don't know how much of this has ever been proven as opposed to alleged. I don't know how much of it is real, frankly. But I suspect that as Bob Mueller digs into this stuff, not only is he going to find connections between Trump and foreign mobsters, but he's going to probably find connections between Trump and American mobsters as well. And
it certainly is quite possible. And the Russians are very devious. They have this term, useful idiot. And I think he has played right into their hands for that. I mean, Putin and that crew.
Yeah, no, I get it. And the billionaires have their useful idiots, too, in the case of Mike Pence. But it's like, what do you do?
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls, my thoughts in the news of the day right after this. Welcome back. Randall in Oceanside, California, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Randall, what's up?
Hey, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the powers of the president as far as pardoning people goes.
Mm-hmm.
First off is, he cannot pardon somebody for an impeachable offense, so it limits his ability to pardon himself.
Well, no, wait a minute. That's not true. He can't pardon someone in the context of an impeachment. He can absolutely pardon somebody for an impeachable offense and head off impeachment. But if there's an impeachment process involved, if Congress is considering articles of impeachment, or if is an impeachment process going on, then he can't step in. So just to be precise in our language here, Randall.
And I would like to find out, because I respect your opinion, is doesn't somebody have to be guilty before they're pardoned?
No. Actually, that's an interesting thing about the whole pardon process. Both Jerry Ford and George Bush Sr. pardoned numerous people in the Nixon and Reagan administrations, respectively, who had never been convicted of crimes. In some cases, had not even been indicted for crimes. It's just that it was fairly obvious the direction the investigations were going. So, there's a long history of Republican presidents pardoning people within the administration of the previous president, to avoid their being prosecuted for crimes.
Well, good. I'm glad. I had a lot of questions about that, and I want to thank you for clearing some of that up. I hope it answers questions for some of your other visitors. I also have one other just point of interest is, do you know that Donald Trump, from what I understand, owns a condominium complex in Las Vegas, got the big Trump name on it, yet he could not get a gaming license for the property.
Right, because he couldn't. I understand it was because he couldn't pass some sort of a morality test in Vegas, although it may have had to do with his bankruptcies. I don't think he actually owns that property. I think he's licensing his name to it, but I could be completely wrong. And that's the property where they tried to unionize, and they fought that. It's that is something that's really worth noting. Randall, thanks a lot for the call. Rick in Weston, West Virginia. Hey, Rick, we got a minute to the break. What's up?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think Pence is more dangerous, and I'll tell you why. Because he's obviously not crazy. He's a Christian fascist, and he's got a lot of backers. And let's not forget, this country was originally settled by Puritans. And everybody's starting, even the people who voted for Trump around here, are starting to wonder, this guy ain't right in the head. Pence is too slick. He is more dangerous. I mean, I don't want to be disparaging, but I tell you what, if this country don't get on the right track, I don't see much of a future for our country, man. We've got to stop these idiots in their tracks. We need to restore our Constitution and get money out of politics and get the Supreme Court straightened out, too. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It seems like it's time to reread Gibbon's book on the collapse of the Roman Empire. It's Rick, thank you for your call. And I think you make a really important point that Pence, because he's not crazy, could be a lot more destructive. Let me riff on that a little bit on the break, or right after this pop. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So, another argument that could be made is that Pence is far more dangerous than Trump, at least domestically. Pence is more likely to take America back in the direction of, openly trashing LGBTQ folks, back in the direction of trying to make Christianity a national religion, all that kind of stuff. Trump just does this, trashing Muslims as a way of, for political gain. But Pence would do it because he actually believes that they're guilty of apostasy, or however you say that word. Apostasy, is that it? Thank you, Chris. Yeah, and So, domestically, in my opinion, Pence could be much more destructive than Trump because he could actually get legislation passed that cuts the taxes on billionaires and makes worse our inequality. He could actually get passed legislation that throws more and more money at Christian churches and things like that, although they're already taking billions. He could actually get passed legislation and policies that work to the benefits of the billionaires in the fossil fuel industry and the polluting industries in ways that Trump is too incompetent to do. So Pence could do a lot more damage to our country domestically, in my opinion, than Trump. Where I freak out is internationally. I don't think that Mike Pence is going to lead us into a war, at least not accidentally or stupidly. I think there's a very high chance, something, I don't want to use the word probability over 50%, but certainly a possibility under 50% that Donald Trump will tweet us or stupidly back us into a war. And that, frankly, a world war at a nuclear era, that's even worse than anything that Pence could do domestically. Henry in St. Paul, Minnesota, your thoughts?
Hey, Tom, how are you? You had started the show with Anne Frank's, calling out how there are a lot of similarities, and I actually think the political landscape that we currently live in is similar to 1930s Weimar Republic. In both cases, both parties, the media, and foreign actors are exploiting Trump's incompetence for both good and evil, including provoking him to war via the recent sanctions. And also, I have to mention that the Dems, many of them who are U.S.-Israeli dual citizens, introduced with Republican support an AIPAC bill criminalizing or deeply fining anti-BDS speech versus the Israeli occupation of Palestine. And last but not least, no one talks about the fact that the Clintons and the DNC encouraged the media to make Trump, Cruz, and Carson's Pied Piper candidates. So with all due respect, and I know that you don't like to have circling firing squads, I believe our circle has been occupied by corporatists who don't care about the American people.
Well, that's a whole other debate about what we're going to do inside the Democratic Party. And Henry, do you know the name of any member of Congress who is a dual citizen?
Yes, absolutely. I have to say, Cardin, Schumer, even Bernie Sanders is a dual citizen.
Bernie Sanders is not a dual citizen. I'm sorry,
everything.
Henry. Bernie is not a dual citizen. I doubt. I would be astonished about Schumer. I don't know anything about Ben Cardin. That wanders into the range of anti-Semitism that just completely creeps me out. I'm sorry, Henry, but ain't going to go there. Steve in DeKalb, Illinois. Hey, or DeKalb, Illinois. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Hey, Tom. As scary as this Sophie's Choice is, two quick points. One, I would choose Pence over Trump because I really view him as being as harmful as George W. was.
Trump?
So I think the difference between Trump and Pence would be Pence could cripple us. Trump could take us down.
Yeah, he could destroy us.
We managed to build back up from W. But I don't think this is going to be our choice because I don't think Pence is going to be as clean as they're trying to make him out to be. They've been so sloppy with how they've done everything that I think it's going to come out in the wash that he's going to go down the river with the rest of them.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. And I would, I'm the one thing that, with regard to the Mueller investigations, that I've been paying careful attention to is looking for the appearance of the words Mike Pence. Because
exactly.
What's his involvement in all this, and or does he have any? And so far, it seems like he's squeaky clean, much to the relief of the Republican Party. But we'll see where it goes. Excellent points, Steve. Thank you, Charles in Opelika, Florida. Hey, Charles, your thoughts?
Hey, how you? Oh well, I'm kind of torn. The thing about Mike Pence though is that he's a little bit more diplomatic, and I think he would show more on the foreign stage with foreign affairs than Donald Trump. Like you said earlier before, I was kind of I took it with a grain of salt that Trump didn't have that much experience on this, on the job. And to be honest with you, the more times he spends on the job, he scared me because he's going to get to know his way around, especially with the generals there. And that can make him dangerous because I called last week and I said to me he's just wearing up and amping up to go into North Korea. Yep. And one thing that I didn't mention was when he jumped on China and started blaming China for part of this. And now that I know he's in league with Eric Prince, and Eric Prince wants to bring they call them contractors, I call them mercenaries to Afghanistan. Now I see that's part of the strategy that he was arguing with a general and wants to get rid of that general in Afghanistan. They have a plan, and it's all about money. Any way that he can enrich himself, even on vacations that he's taking now, back to his compounds, somewhere or another, he's billing the American government for this. This is our taxpayer money that he is on vacation with, and he's trying to clear out the White House, which is a dump. The people's house is a dump. And he's probably going to try to turn it into what Vladimir Putin has with all that gold and, all that stuff that as Americans, as working people, we should be offended by because it doesn't reflect, how we live in our homes and how we built the White House up. So, to be honest with you, Pence is a lesser evil, but Donald Trump has to go, either way you put it.
Yeah, it's kind of like, do you want to die by rabies or cholera? It's like, rabies is a pretty violent death. Cholera can be a pretty bad death, too. Amazing. Charles, thank you for the call. It's a tough question. It's a real tough question. We'll continue with it through the day. Forrest Wilder is going to be with us. He's the editor of the Texas Observer. Did you know that there was a town in Texas that decided, let's go libertarian, see how that works out? We'll tell you all about that after the break. And in our third hour, who's better at stealing our vote? This should be interesting. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. And welcome to Thom Hartmann University, our book club. And today we're reading from Ralph Nader's Breaking Through Power. It's easier than we think. This is from page 74, the chapter How the System is Rigged. According to Russell Mokaber, editor of the Corporate Crime Reporter, quote, corporate crime takes far more lives, causes far more injuries and diseases, and steals far more money than street crime. But the vast amount of law enforcement resources, mass media attention, and prison cell blocks are devoted only to street crime. Just consider these preventable casualties. Almost 60,000 annual workplace-related fatalities from both disease and trauma. 54,000 deaths a year from air pollution. Over 100,000 lives lost as a result of medical malpractice. Nearly 100,000 lives lost from hospital-induced infections. Over 100,000 fatalities from adverse effects of drugs, and over 40,000 deaths every year due to inadequate or no health care coverage for diagnosis, treatment, and medication. There are far larger numbers of sicknesses and injuries attached to these data sets. These statistics have haunting human faces. Children, women, men, and families destroyed by uncontrollable, monetized minds. Whether they are caused by recklessness, criminal negligence, or worse, the key factors in common are the preventability of such pain and the suffering inflicted from commercially induced neglect, predation, manslaughter, and homicide. By comparison, street and home homicides do not exceed 14,000 lives lost annually. Now see how companies have made sure they have the laws that they need to go after you, and how they make sure that the law can be used as their punisher. The giant multi-tiered home mortgage business, now driven by the same 1%ers who profited from crashing the economy in 2008, can nail you if you misrepresent information on your mortgage application. Suppose you say you're going to occupy your house as a principal residence to get a lower interest rate and down payment, and you don't for some reason. Lenders can call the loan and demand repayment if the mortgage balance is outstanding. Absent that payment, the lender can seize your home, foreclosure. In addition, by claiming you committed bank fraud, these companies can use the FBI against you. As the veteran housing columnist Kenneth R. Harvey warned, this can trigger severe financial penalties, prosecution, and prison time for ordinary Americans. But how many bankers feel the cold metal of handcuffs tighten on their wrists when their crimes rob American families of their homes and life savings? Health insurance companies have similar supporting laws to deny medical coverage by alleging illegal activities. This could mean anything from non-disclosure of traffic violations to gun accidents, even when there has been no conviction. It could mean something as vague as hazardous behavior, according to the New York Times. If a company paid you and comes back for their money, they can get you prosecuted for fraud. These corporate Goliaths are too big to fail. If they know how to enact laws to make sure that you are, and they know how to enact laws to make sure that you are too small to stop them. Corporate state culture, the plutocracy whom oligarchy is given an astonishing exoneration, so long as it claims that violence and mayhem are not their direct purpose, but an unfortunate byproduct that just couldn't be helped. Like when innocent people are accidentally killed by U.S. drone attacks, the government seems to quietly get a free pass. It's almost as if corporations get away with a permanent defense of an institutional insanity, a defense going global in terms of deadly supply chains, from horrific African mines to dangerous factories in China, India, and Bangladesh. Deoxygenation and poisoning of the vast oceans, estuaries, rivers, and lakes, upping greenhouse gases into rapid climate destabilization, extending the range of infectious diseases due to habitat and ecological disruption and desecration, and changing the nature of nature itself through unregulated genetic engineering and nanotechnology. Even with 6 million slow, agonizing deaths a year globally attributed to the tobacco business, cigarettes are still demonically promoted by one-percenters who reap staggering profits from selling their addictive and poisonous product, especially in developing nations where regulations protecting children do not exist. The excuse is forever that corporatists have no intention, knowledge, or reason to do harmful things. The institutional insanity defense again. Or the manufacturers of weapons of mass destruction, whose militant advertisements say they are just helping the national defense, but are not at all responsible for their products' use in the coercive policies of empire and perpetual war. Is it institutional madness or infantilism? Did the World War II allies let the giant Krupp works in Germany get away with this excuse after the war ended? It's time for people to take away these rationalizations of omnicide from corporations that demand they be legally privileged as persons for the pursuit of profits, but not as persons for our pursuit of them as criminal predators and refugees from justice. In the 2012 U.S. presidential campaign, Republican nominee Mitt Romney, asked about corporate personhood, replied that it was a given, saying, "Hey, corporations are people, my friend," like it was a science fact he learned in 5th grade. This is no mere throwaway line. Billions of dollars of litigating, advertising, marketing, and corporatist commentary have been focused on driving this people image into our minds from childhood. Regularly, full-page ads show that Goliath corporations like Walmart or Lockheed Martin are just people like you. The ads are filled with pictures and names of the faithful workers who bring you goods and services. The book by Ralph Nader, Breaking Through Power.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and on the line with us is Forrest Wilder. He's the editor of the Texas Observer, a newspaper in Texas. The TexasObserver.org is the website. You can tweet him at Forrest4Trees, F-O-R-R-E-S-T, number 4, T-R-E-E-S, Forrest4Trees, or at Texas Observer. And Forrest, welcome to the program.
Great to be here.
Great to have you with us. Do you want to quickly tell us about the Texas Observer, what it is and what you do?
Well, we're a nonprofit, public interest, progressive news magazine and website in Texas, and we've been around since 1954. Molly Ivins was our editor at one point, and Jim Hightower, and lots of other great folks have come through doing journalism in the strangest state in the union, as we call it.
There you go. Okay. So a group of libertarians decided to create the freest little city in Texas. The title of the article in the Texas Observer that I believe you wrote, right?
I was the editor on it.
Yeah, the editor. Okay. You edited. So tell us about this town. Tell us about this experiment in libertarianism that happened down in Texas.
Well, it's a little town south of San Antonio called Von Ormy. And it was unincorporated for its whole existence until about 2008, when people in town were getting nervous about San Antonio encroaching. So they started considering whether to incorporate, and the town was pretty divided about it because they were sort of resistant to having to deal with some of the things that come with being municipal government. But there was a guy in town by the name of Art Martinez Guevara, who was a young law student, who suggested that they form something called a Liberty City. And this is basically the idea of creating a low services, low tax kind of, a slimmed down version of municipal government to try to have the best of both worlds, to have some services, but also avoid some of what some people in town viewed as the excesses of city government, like they might have if they became part of San Antonio. So they went ahead and incorporated, and they elected Art Martinez Guevara as mayor and the city council, and basically went to work setting up this Liberty City. And then really over the next 8 or 9 years, this thing unfolded, or I guess deteriorated might be the better word to use, and as really just kind of a disaster. City council members were arrested for violating of the Meetings Act, and they eliminated a property tax, which left them without the ability to pay for some essential services. The police department collapsed, the fire department collapsed, and basically the Liberty City experiment, as Art Martinez Guevara called it, ended up being kind of running amok.
So how do the libertarians explain this?
Well, it's interesting. I've heard him speak a few times, and they don't really have. He has very little to say about what went wrong. He basically just kind of describes it as a quote a unique experiment in democracy, and kind of talks about some of the successes. And I think to the extent that it addresses where things went, the reasons why things went haywire, kind of points fingers at some of his political opponents.
Interesting. There have. Do you know of any successful libertarian experiments anywhere in the world? I do not know of any.
It's interesting. With these articles kind of pop up from time to time, because it seems like this has been tried a number of times. I mean, there was the whole kind of floating cities thing. I'm not sure how far they got with that. There was the everyone moved to New Hampshire deal.
Right. They were going to do it with Belle Isle off Detroit.
Yeah. So they don't tend to go too well. I think because there's some utopian thinking that underlies some of the ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. I mean, the whole libertarian idea is, in my opinion, is contrary to human nature, because it assumes that, as Maggie Thatcher said, there is no such thing as society that's only a collection of individuals, when in fact we are social animals. I mean, we're mammals. We're designed to be interdependent with each other, and the libertarian idea is that, like the son and daughter who were the heroes of Atlas Shrugged, that if you inherit a railroad from your daddy, then you become the master of the universe, kind of thing.
Right.
Amazing. Well, it's interesting that the libertarians there are at least acknowledging that maybe this is not a political theology that is practical, or are they not acknowledging? I mean, it's like Sam Brownback, right? Sam Brownback was, tried a semi-libertarian idea. He said, let's try Reaganomics here in Kansas. We will be the demonstration project for the country. Everybody will see how successful we are. He cut taxes radically, including presumably taxes on the Koch brothers, or at least the one who lives there in Kansas. I think it's Charles. And it was an absolute unmitigated disaster for Kansas. So bad that Donald Trump had to bail him out by giving them the post of ambassador to the world's religions. It's like, talk about a low place to be caught as you're falling. Go ahead.
Well, I will say that so the Liberty City model is not actually in statute. So this guy, the founder of the town and the mayor, became a chief of staff to a libertarian-leaning senator, and as chief of staff, he and his boss proposed legislation to kind of make it part of just a formal type of Texas city government, and the bill went nowhere. I think there's not a huge appetite for it, at least at the city level, for doing this, replicating this in other places.
Right. So he was attaching himself to a state senator. So,
yeah.
Just as an observer, it seems to me that the cities, and for that matter, even the small towns in the United States, that are the most progressive, that have, strong infrastructure, that have, that tax themselves enough that they can actually provide high quality education, that they can keep the streets, pothole free, that they develop the advanced kinds of infrastructure, new alternative energy sources, a high-speed broadband, things like that. Chattanooga, a great example of this, civic broadband. That those are the cities that are really booming, that they're really bringing people in. And the cities that are going the more of a libertarian/Republican route of being extremely minimalist in what they're offering are the cities that are dying. Is that, does your experience, I mean, you live in Texas, so there's a lot of towns in Texas. Does your observation comport with mine?
Well, I mean, pretty much every major city in Texas is run by, they're nonpartisan, but they're basically Democrats and progressives. And I would say the number one political theme of the moment in the state government and the legislature is the Republican legislature and governor attacking cities. In fact, we had a lieutenant governor just over the weekend say that all of the country's problems, all of Texas's problems, are concentrated in cities because they're run by Democrats. Peculiar thing to say when 80% of the state is actually Texas is urban, and most of the economic activity and growth and people moving here, they're moving to the cities. Rural Texas, in many cases, is kind of stagnant and troubled at the moment.
Did you just say that 80% of the population of Texas lives in cities?
Lives in urban areas, so basically metro areas.
Wow,
that's correct.
That kind of runs contrary to the stereotype of Texas as being rural and somewhat reactionary.
Well, we have the largest rural population of any state, so it is big. But it's a huge state. It's 28 million people, and most people live in Austin, San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, the metro areas, and the surrounding suburbs.
Right.
So Texas is an urban state, absolutely.
Right. Fascinating stuff. And finally, we're talking with Forrest Wilder, the editor of the Texas Observer, the website texasobserver.org. You can tweet him at Forrest4Trees. Finally, Forrest, any word about these libertarians who screwed up the Liberty City thing, trying to do it again?
Well, I believe there's an estimate of 10 Liberty cities total in Texas. So there has been some replication, but I don't think that it's really caught fire beyond just a handful of really small towns. And like I said, efforts to kind of expand it by making it a formal type of city government in Texas, that hasn't really gone anywhere. So I don't think there's a huge appetite for it. And perhaps this is a sort of object lesson in what can go wrong, what happened in Von Army.
Yeah, you think? Forrest Wilder, the editor of the Texas Observer. Thanks for sharing with us, Forrest. Great talking.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. TexasObserver.org. You can read the story over there. Hang on just a second.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Title of the story is The Rise and Fall of the Freest Little City in Texas. And you can find it over at TexasObserver.org. You can tweet Forrest at Forrest4Trees. We'll be back. And welcome back. Alex in Columbia, Maryland. Hey, Alex, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Tom. Give me a second. Let me get you off speaker. Yes. I wanted to speak regarding who's better for the country, Pence or Trump. And to me, we elected Trump, and we should allow him to serve out his term.
I didn't elect Trump. And the majority of Americans didn't elect Trump. I mean, a technicality in the Electoral College that was designed to preserve the power of the slave states elected Trump.
I understand that. But the point is we had a choice, and, that was what happened. Pence is such an evil person, in my opinion, that his memory should be relegated to, like, the cesspools of history, not to be taught to our kids at schools in the future.
Right.
And the fact that we would building monuments to Pence instead of, say, somebody like Hillary Clinton, whom I do not actually have any affection for, really grinds my gears to no end. And so,
well, let me toss something in the mix here, Alex. The media right now is rather breathlessly reporting this. The initial report was in the Washington Post an hour or so ago, and now it's being picked up by all the television networks, that U.S. intelligence agencies are saying that North Korea has succeeded in miniaturizing their nuclear bombs so that they can fit on the tip of a intercontinental ballistic missile. So if the U.S. intelligence assessment is accurate, North Korea now has the ability to take out Los Angeles or Chicago with a nuclear weapon. Does that change your math with regard to who should be the commander-in-chief, Trump or Pence?
It complicates things, but ultimately, I think the fact that we actually got to the point where Trump could become the president should say something about how things have been going. And I don't know. I think he really does threaten the empire, and that's something that's fine with me, because can you imagine the Democratic Party of this time last year saying they're antitrust? I mean, I think that's progress, and that's only happening because we have Trump.
Yeah, and pro single payer, et cetera.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's just because of Trump, though. I am firmly of the opinion that in the 2009 election, that when we elected Barack Obama in 2009, we believed and hoped that we were electing the next FDR, and instead we got the next Bill Clinton, basically. And as a consequence, I mean, some good stuff was done, and he did not have a destructive presidency. He had a very constructive presidency. He did some great stuff during the 74 days that he had a filibuster-free Senate, but it wasn't the kind of foundational change, and he didn't use the bully pulpit the way that, for example, Trump is doing right now.
Correct.
And I understand why. And this is not intended to be so much a critique of President Obama as it is a comment that the country has been ready for change for over a decade. In fact, I think you could argue that the 2000 election at a certain level was about that, and a genuine progressive change. And we keep thinking we're getting it, or thinking that we're getting close to it. And frankly, I think even a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump thought that they were getting true progressive change. He said no more wars. He said protect Social Security, stuff like that. The fact of the matter is we didn't, and he isn't. So anyhow, Alex, thanks for the call.
On April 15th,
hey, Thom Hartmann here with the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm serious about my health, and so I'm doing something.
We're proud to provide you with independent, unfiltered news and documentaries. And as our valued viewer, you can help us continue bringing free speech TV well into the future. Join our Pearly Gate Rebels, our planned giving program. Your gift of any size will help ensure democracy endures through an informed citizenry. You can donate property, money, or assets. It's easy. My spouse and I are proud Pearly Gate Rebels. We're doing our part to ensure that Free Speech TV will be here to deliver thought-provoking news and information well into the future. Join us. Call 877-378-8669 or email me at valerie@freespeech.org. Rebel against media owned by billionaires and become one of our Pearly Gate Rebels today.
John in Newark, Delaware. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
How you doing, Tom?
Good.
I have a question for you. You remember when Obama got in, I think it was like the first week or the first month, how they took away his BlackBerry?
I don't have a specific recollection of that, but, it doesn't, make sense.
Okay, well, they took away his
BlackBerry. I do remember. Yeah, he loved his BlackBerry, but they had to give him a secure phone.
They didn't take Trump's away?
Well, they may have. I mean, he might be tweeting out of a secure phone.
Yeah, but why don't they just cut him off and say, look, you can't use the phone?
Oh, well, they didn't cut off Obama. All they said is you can't use that old-fashioned phone in the White House anymore. You've got to use, one of these, $60,000 phones that we get from a defense contractor.
Oh, okay. I was wondering the other day. I got up yesterday morning and MSNBC was saying he didn't tweet this weekend. He's being a good boy.
Yeah, right.
You know? Okay, I just was wondering what was going on.
Yeah, no, that's the story. I don't think any, and this, by the way, is showing the limits of John Kelly's power, you know, as chief of staff. When Donald Trump,
they try to say that he's the one that snubbed him up a little bit, you know.
Yeah. I can just see John Kelly, you know, banging on Trump's bedroom door at 5 o'clock in the morning. You're in there tweeting. I know you're in there tweeting.
Okay,
oh,
let's
man.
go.
John, thanks for the call. Good talking to you. Mark in Livonia, Michigan. Hey, Mark, the city where our oldest daughter was born. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind?
Awesome. Hi there, Tom. How you doing?
Good.
You've already rather astutely covered the whole domestic and international thing, which is what I was going to riff on. I just wanted to point out that, I'm what scares me is having two different man babies with nuclear weapons. You know, I feel like we could dig ourselves out of a domestic hole, but the whole international thing is very scary. So,
I'm not sure Pence is a man baby, though. I think he's more of, although, he defers to mother. He calls his wife mother, and he doesn't do anything unless mother tells him to. And, there's some weirdness there, but the man baby thing. But Mark, hang on just a second. Hang on just a second. I'll let you respond. But there's something I wanted to get in here, too. And that is that the Washington Post reported an hour or so ago, and it's just now being picked up on all the television networks, that U.S. intelligence agencies are now saying that North Korea has actually succeeded in taking one of their nuclear bombs and making it small enough to be the nose cone of an ICBM. And they've got ICBMs that can now hit Los Angeles, Chicago, maybe even New York, or Washington, D.C. And so now that the U.S. intelligence agencies, now keep in mind, yes, these are the same intelligence agencies who told us Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons, but still, hopefully they've gotten better in the 15 years since then. Now that the U.S. intelligence agencies are telling us that Kim Jong-un is armed with nukes that could reach the United States, does that change your equation about Donald Trump versus Mike Pence being the commander-in-chief?
Well, I think so. I mean, it certainly makes it more disturbing. My thought was actually as Trump being the man baby.
Right.
So, I'm really thinking that Pence might be less likely to get us involved in a nuclear war, but that's not clear either.
Yeah. Good point. Mark, thanks for the call. Very good point. Carl in Asheville, North Carolina. Hey, Carl, what's on your mind?
Yeah, there's a scenario no one seems to be talking about, and I think it has to do with Pence versus Trump as to how they would handle it and who the hell they would listen to.
Right.
The scenario, North Korea basically, to me, wants to be at the table. They want to be considered one of the big boys.
Yep.
And they have an inferiority complex.
Yep.
So a scenario, which I used to design, is one of taking, and if they can reach the continental U.S. with an atomic device, is to explode it in basically an unpopulated area, saying we can do it if we want to.
You mean they would like nuke the Mojave Desert kind of thing?
Yeah, just saying, here, this is what we can do. Now, if you retaliate, we can get to Tokyo and Seoul and take them off the map before you can take out anything that we can send that short distance.
Right.
So that puts us in the situation of, if we retaliate, two of our major allies get creamed. And who is going to be able to sit back and make a decision rather than a rash one, but a calculated one using our military advisors?
Right. Well, first of all, I would be astonished if North Korea, if North Korea were to set off a nuke in the Mojave Desert. I don't subscribe to this theory that Kim Jong-un is crazy. I know it's popular in the United States, and the people who promulgate it love to have pictures of Dennis Rodman looking kind of weird with all his piercings, next to Kim Jong-un, and the odd couple, and these, and he's nutty and all this kind of stuff. But the fact of the matter is that family has ruled that country since the 30s, the 40s, whatever it was, and has done so successfully. I mean, you could argue starving your people isn't successful, but they've held on to power. These people are not irrational. They are merely not small d Democrats. I mean, they don't believe in democracy. So we have to keep that in mind. Carl, thanks for the call. Good to hear from you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So I'm not sure what the best metaphor is. You know, do you want to die of cholera or rabies? Do you want to die of dysentery or tuberculosis? It's like, you know, what is it?
And welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading an excerpt from Robert Wolfe's book, Original Wisdom, Stories of an Ancient Way of Knowing. I wrote the foreword for it. Robert Wolfe just died just a few months ago, just this last year, in Hawaii. Louise and I visited him there a number of times. He was in his 90s. And back in the 1950s, he was an anthropologist and sociologist who had been hired by the Malaysian government to figure out why this one particular Aboriginal tribe, the Sonoy, who lived deep inside the jungle, hunting-gathering tribe, why they were, quote, lazy, why they were unwilling to work in the rubber plantations. And he got to know them, and he discovered that their view of the world was completely different than ours. And that's essentially what this book is about, and it's absolutely a mind-boggling book. I'll share a little. This is from the middle of the book. This is page 86. It's finally he's reached the point where they'll let him sleep in the village with them. He says, in time, I grew to know them better. But it was when I began to overnight in their villages that I learned that they literally lived in another reality. When it became dark, people huddled together for warmth and companionship. In the tropics, there's no long period of dusk. It grows dark quickly. The air would become cool, and people would move closer together, reaching out, touching a neighbor, perhaps holding hands. Women might run their fingers through the hair of the person sitting next to them. During the nights I stayed over, they would often gather around me and have me ask them questions. Then they would ask me questions, very quietly and softly. Our being together was not like other social situations I'd ever experienced. We talked, but softly. They did not know how to compete for attention. A few words now and then were all that were spoken, a question or a comment, a simple answer, long silences. Sometimes someone would have some tobacco and light a cigarette, tobacco rolled into a leaf, which was passed around the group. People might ask each other whether they had noticed that particularly bright patch of sunlight on the side of the river behind a certain tree, or if they had noticed that large yellow bird that sang in the morning. Evening was a time of reflection, of gentle communication, of being together. I never knew their blood relationships, but evening times felt like family. As it grew later, one of the people would get up to go into one of the houses, more often little more than lean-tos or rickety huts on stilts, and fall asleep. Eventually, each of us had found an empty spot on the floor of one of the shelters, and wrapped in our sarongs, we huddled close to whoever else slept in that house that night. The houses did not belong to anyone. It seemed that each of the 4 or 5 little shelters was for all the people living in that settlement at that moment. We would fall asleep whenever we chose, and I'm sure with whomever we wanted to spend the night. Yes, people had sex, but even that was gentle, quiet, and discreet. Occasionally, someone might turn over and bump into a couple being a little too acrobatic or noisy, and there would be a grunt. Or people might move away from a couple that made too much to do about their lovemaking. Passionate lovemaking between young people often took place during the day, outside in a more hidden spot in the jungle, I was told. In the morning, we might not all wake up at the same time, but those who woke up early would lay quietly, waiting for more people to awaken. And somehow, as if by magic, we would find ourselves sitting in a circle, rubbing our eyes, stretching the kinks out. One person would say, I saw a bird, a beautiful bird. Someone else would say, yes, I too saw a bird. What kind of bird was it? Another would ask. And so they would create a story with images from our dreams. They did not think that they were sharing dreams as we think of dreams. The Sonoy believed that the world we live in is a shadow world, and that the real world is behind it. At night, they believe, we visit the real world. In the morning, we share what we saw and learned there. The story that was created around the memories that 4 or 5 people brought back from the real world set the tone for that day. Sometimes one of the group would take the lead in soliciting input from each person in the room. How about you? What do you remember? Other times, the story flowed without help. A few times, no story emerged at all. It was very obvious that when a more or less coherent story was created around the images we shared, we who had slept in that shelter would live that story that day. Usually, the stories were simple. A bird had shown the way to a tree that was bearing fruit. Later that day, some of us would find that tree, and of course, it did have ripe fruit. Or the story was about a bad storm, so people would stay close to the shelters all day, and yes, there was a big storm in the late afternoon. Occasionally, the stories were about things that affected all of them, all the people in the settlement, or perhaps even all the Sonoy. In that case, they would make it a point to share with the people who had slept in other shelters as soon as possible. It might take all morning to disseminate that story to everyone. I did not witness any attempts to call a meeting, but it was obvious that when a serious story came out of a morning's dream telling, all the people in the settlement would eventually hear that story. I learned about all of this very early during the time that I spent with the Sonoy. It was in what I thought of as the first village, the first settlement I visited, that an important story emerged from what I brought back from the real world during one of my nights there. It made a big impression on me because part of the story came from my dream. It was a particularly vivid dream about one of my family's dogs, an all-black mongrel that seemed to have come with the house we rented in the suburbs of Kuala Lumpur. We had tried to get rid of that dog. In fact, one of the first days after we moved we had run over to over the poor dog in the driveway, but he would not leave. We tried chasing him away. He kept coming back. So we adopted him and called him Jaga, which is Malay for guard or protector. I do not remember that Jaga was a particularly good watchdog, but he was around. And he goes on to tell his dream, and then it's just an absolutely fascinating story. Original Wisdom, Stories of an Ancient Way of Knowing by Robert Wolfe.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Mike in Redlands, California. Hey, Mike, you're on the air.
Hi, this is Mike from Punks for Progress. How you doing, Tom?
Just great. What's on your mind, Mike?
I would just like to weigh in on your whether Trump is worse than Pence, and I think he is because of his incompetence. I think Pence is more competent, and I believe that the Senate will work with him better.
Yeah, but competent at what? I mean, do you really want the laws of this country rolled back to 1950 or maybe even 1850?
Oh, heavens no. No, and I agree with you that he's an absolute ideologue.
Yeah. And a complete toady for the oligarchs in this country.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So your vote is that Trump is more dangerous than Pence.
Only because of his incompetence. I think
because of his incompetence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No,
yeah.
I was just going to say, like I said, I think Congress would have. I mean, I know they've got checks on Trump now. But I think they'd work with him. I think they'd work with Pence more.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I know either way, we still have to stay woke.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well said, Mike. Mike, thanks a lot for the call. Maggie in Danville, Illinois. Hey, Maggie, what's up?
Oh, well, Rex Tillerson must be ordering antacids by the boatload by now.
Why is that?
With all this that you were talking about.
Oh, with North Korea. Yeah, as the Secretary of State. You're absolutely right. Yep.
Well, I think really that Pence is more dangerous because of his connection to Betsy Voss. They are of the same mind, and the Prince family, and Blackwater.
Yeah.
And Eric was, they was talking, I think it was in the Washington Post this morning, about his belief that these wars should be fought by mercenaries.
Right, his mercenaries specifically. Yes.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And that's kind of scary, too.
Yeah, I agree. When you privatize war, you create incentives for war, and we should never, ever create incentives for war, as Dwight Eisenhower pointed out in January of 1961. I'm with you. Maggie, thank you for the call. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi. First, may I say something about de Tocqueville? Because you mentioned him yesterday in equality. I believe he said something to the extent that given the choice between equality and liberty, Americans would favor equality. And if you think about it, there is liberty in equality.
Yes.
But anyway, the other thing about Pence is I'm not so sure he's clean and that he might not be involved in this to begin with, because his press secretary, Mark Lauder, I think it was in Think Progress or something, was getting very weaselly when they were asking him about Pence and Russia, whether he had ever met anybody. And if you remember in the beginning, Trump refused to go to any security meetings. Pence went instead, so he knew what was going on. So I think that Pence, maybe not immediately, but at least tangentially, will be considered involved in this whole thing.
Could be.
I'm still president either.
Yeah, it's possible. I'm continuing to predict that if there is any consequential fallout that has to do with Russia, it will be an association between Russian organized crime or Russian oligarchs and the Trump organization or Donald Trump, rather than the Russian government. But, you know, I could be very wrong, and, you know, we need to see. And we need to let Bob Mueller do his work, and it would be nice to see an independent commission doing the investigation. But, yeah. So in that regard, though, Pence has, in my mind, you know, a very different kind of corruption problem, and that is that he's been in the back pocket of American oligarchs for years and years, American oligarchs who are actively working to undermine small d democracy in this country, in my opinion, and particularly to do so on behalf of their profit, their profit cow, which is the fossil fuel industry. So, you know, he might be dirty in that regard. It's just the problem is that the Supreme Court has pretty much decriminalized most of those kinds of corruption. But we'll see. We'll see. Excellent points all, Bill. Thank you for the call. Jill in Manila, Indiana. Hey, Jill, what's up?
Yeah. On the question of Pence and Trump, I mean, I'm from Indiana, and I lived under Pence as governor for 4 years. And
what was it like?
Not good. Not good.
How so?
I will say that, well, he's shut down, I think, all but 2 Planned Parenthood clinics in the state. We had the whole RFRA thing.
Right. The religious, so-called Religious Freedoms Act, yeah.
Yeah, he did not want to accept refugees from Syria and other countries. We had a superintendent of schools, which was a Democrat woman, voted in. He rendered her impotent, took her power away. What scares me about him is that he will get stuff done through the system where Trump is incompetent. So,
yeah.
I don't know. I think he's very dangerous.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jill, because you're saying the exact same thing an earlier caller said, but you're voting for the different candidate for that reason. And this was my concern up until very recently, is that, you know, Mike Pence is clearly more competent than Donald Trump, and therefore he could do a lot more damage to this country. However, you know, when it comes to international relations, you know, it becomes a whole hell of a lot less partisan and a heck of a lot more, you know, let's not have a nuclear war here. And, but, you know, so, yeah, it's like, I get it. Jill, thank you for the call. Excellent points all. Todd in Minneapolis. Hey, Todd, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Tom?
Good.
Yeah, I was thinking about this myself, and I guess I agree with most people that Pence kind of frightens me more because he is more confident. But I guess my whole opinion is the fact that, well, if this committee comes up with the fact that Trump actually did collude with the Russians, we're looking at actual treason here.
Right.
And that's why I guess I want to see him removed, even though I'm afraid of Pence, because at some point there has to be certain accountability.
What if it wasn't Trump, but it was, say, you know, somebody on Trump's staff, General Kelly?
Well, you know, I think whoever it is needs to be removed. I think,
well, Kelly's already been removed. You know, he, in all probability, I think he's going to be prosecuted. Right. We'll see, but or excuse me, Flynn. I'm sorry. I mentioned Kelly. I meant Michael Flynn.
Right.
Thank you.
I mean, I think whoever it is needs to be prosecuted, because a lot of Americans, myself included, have this idea that, you know, once you get to be a certain level of wealth and power and influence, rules basically don't apply to you.
Right.
And, you know, our democracy is starting to look like a joke to the rest of the world if we let the President of the United States or some of his staff get away with actual treason.
Yeah.
That's my take on the whole thing.
Yep.
Okay, well said, Todd. Thank you for the call. Kenny in Ashland, Ohio. Excuse me. Hey, Kenny, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. With this Trump versus Pence, it's actually a real bad lose-lose because Trump, I think he could lead us definitely into a war, like you said, either with tweets or just with his arrogance. But he can't get nothing passed in Congress without a signing statement or change the rules in Congress to eliminate the filibuster to push things through.
Right.
Where I think Pence, on the other hand, I don't see him leading us into a war, like blundering ourselves into a war. But I do see him uniting Congress and passing every terrible bill that you can ever think of.
Right.
So it's actually a lose-lose. Which one's going to be more dangerous? It depends on whether you're talking about foreign or domestic.
Yeah, that's what it's coming down to for me, too, and particularly given this revelation today from the U.S. intelligence agencies that the North Koreans have succeeded in miniaturizing their nuclear weapons so that they'll fit on the tip of an ICBM. That significantly raises the stakes, not that they weren't already very, very high. Kenny, thanks for the call. And, we've all got some serious thinking to do here. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We are going to check in with Talk Media News in a few minutes, find out what's going on in the world, and we'll continue talking with taking your phone conversations. And at the top of the hour, I want to talk about stealing the vote. Welcome back. Tony, watching Free Speech TV on DirecTV in Shirley, New York. Hey, Tony, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how are you this afternoon?
I am great, but I'll get better. I hope the same is true for you, Tony.
I'm trying as well. I guess two notes of interest. I've been tracking the strength of the dollar since the inauguration of Donald Trump. From January until June, it appears that the strength of the dollar has declined consistently month over month, thereby increasing the strength of the Dow, which in my opinion would be, for lack of a better term, a bubble waiting to explode.
Yeah, it brings in foreign investment.
I don't see anybody on commercial media covering this particular aspect. I think that this would be interesting because a lot of people don't simply realize that while the dollar declines in value, and Donald Trump touts the gross domestic product, people don't seem to realize that the gross domestic product has been increasing because people outside the United States with a weakened dollar can buy more from the United States. I don't think it does any of us any good, and it appears that we're heading towards a bubble that's going to explode towards the end of this year, if not sooner.
I think you're absolutely right. I subscribe to this investment newsletter at the Aiden Forecast. And
yes, that's what I would look at myself.
Yeah, and they recommended some 4 or 5 months ago, start moving your spare cash out of dollars and into euros, which Louise and I did. And it's, not that we're wildly rich or anything, but you have a little bit set aside for retirement. And it's remarkable how it's been dropping, but it makes perfect sense. Peter Navarro, who's, in the Trump administration, used to be a regular on this show, and even though he's a conservative, we share a nearly identical perception of trade. And his point, and probably others' point, has been that historically that if you can drive the dollar down, and Trump talked about this on the campaign trail, you drive the dollar down the value of the dollar, you make imports more expensive and you make exports less expensive. That helps the U.S. trade balance, the trade deficit. That's arguably a good thing for the United States. The only people who get hurt are people who are traveling from the United States to some other country or whatever. And I think that it's entirely predictable that they would do that. The question is, how far are they going to let the dollar drop? At what point does the dollar dropping become a dangerous thing as opposed to merely kind of a rebalancing thing? Thoughts on that, Tony?
Well, if you track the index, it appears that it's been consistently dropping over the last 6 months, and it doesn't appear to be abating in any way whatsoever. So that would be a real primary concern. I'm more so than the North Korea conflict, because I doubt anybody's going to get into a nuclear war, although it's something to be concerned about. But I think more than anything else, I think having capitalism implode upon us would be something that would be much more an existential threat, because considering the fact that most countries base the value of their currency on the dollar.
Yeah, there's two things that'll drive this, in my opinion. One is when the Fed starts consequentially raising interest rates, and the other is when the dollar starts appreciating. Those two things combined are going to make it harder for people, harder for companies to borrow money, which is going to have a depressive effect on the stock market. The increased interest rates and the increased value of the dollar is going to decrease the amount of foreign money that's coming into the United States that's going into the stock market, and that could trigger something. So I think we're on the same page, Tony, right?
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, good talking to you. Thanks a lot for the call. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be back. It's coming up on 48 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us is Ellen Ratner with Talk Media News. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Ellen's new book, Loving What You Do. Hey, Ellen, what's going on in the world today?
Okay, well, it looks like North Korea is going to plan on joining the nuclear club despite the United Nations sanctions that were passed unanimously, which includes people who have the veto power, so they still passed it. But it looks like they have miniaturized a nuclear weapon that can get on one of their missiles, which, of course, can reach, they think, parts of the United States a lot faster than they thought North Korea could do it initially.
Didn't we go through this kind of song and dance about 15 or 20 years ago with Pakistan?
Well, we did, but Pakistan is not as loony as the guy that runs North Korea.
Apparently.
At least at Pakistan, and we were concerned that they had a nuclear weapon, etc.
What happened to Ellen? We just lost her picture, but what about her phone audio? Ellen, are you on the phone?
Starving there. I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. That's
okay,
strange.
Sorry. Don't know what happened. Yeah. Okay, so the president is having his roundtable on opioid addiction. That is.
Whoa. Yeah, but why is her phone cutting out?
Possibly. I'm still cutting out.
Wow.
Yeah, it was so strange because both your phone and your internet cut out at the same time. Maybe you've got your phone service bundled with your internet service.
I do, unfortunately. Okay.
That explains it. Okay. So anyhow, try it again and let's see.
Okay. So basically, the president is having a roundtable on opioid addiction. He's going to be making a statement before he.
Oh, Ellen, I'm sorry. This is the problem of bundling your phone service with your internet and television. It doesn't work. Ellen, I'm going to have to drop you. It's just, we're not getting through anything at all here. I'm going to put you on hold. You can talk to Louise and we can work this out. Paul in Louise, she's on line 11. Paul in Lucerne, California. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom.
Hey.
I think anything Pence does, we could roll back when we take 2018 and 2020. So he's definitely the lesser of two evils. Now, as far as North Korea goes, dropping a bomb somewhere in a deserted area in the United States of America, any country in the world launches a nuclear weapon towards the United States, there will be a submarine that pops up somewhere in an ocean close to that country and wipe that country off the face of the earth.
I agree.
They have like a 15-minute lifespan as soon as they launch that. They better launch everything they have because within 15 minutes they're done.
Yep, I agree. I didn't.
That's my specialty.
Yeah, I don't think that's a viable scenario. So the question becomes then, how do we deal with it? And I think one of the most dangerous delusions that we operate under is the idea that Kim Jong-un and the entire North Korean administration are irrational. They're not. They're very rational actors. They've succeeded in running a police state for 3 generations now, and it doesn't mean that we should be working with them. It doesn't mean we should be best buds with them, but it does mean that we should stop sitting around saying, "Oh, they're just crazy," and that we should
negotiate with them. I think we should try to settle this diplomatically. Carter went over there and did a really good job of it.
Yeah.
but he's too old now. We need to have somebody else go over there. Because all they want is attention.
Yeah,
that's why they're rattling the saber.
Yeah, I agree, and I think
afraid.
Yeah, and it's like there was an op-ed in the Washington Post a couple of weeks ago where they said, this is not about North Korea, this is about Russia specifically, and they said, the thing that Vladimir Putin wants the most is the respect of the West. He wants to be seen as a major player in the international stage, and then the next sentence was, and we cannot give it to him. And I'm reading this going, why not? Why not respect foreign leaders, treat them as, it's a nuclear power. North Korea is now a nuclear power. If he wants to be treated like, he's running a real country, so treat him that way, and then let's engage with him and let's try to bring him into the world. I mean, this whole idea of like we're better than they are and therefore we don't talk to them is so
that's how wars start.
Yeah, and it's like from a bad episode of Beverly Hills 90217 or whatever the zip code was. It's like we're the cool kids and they're the scuzzy kids and et cetera, and it's like that's no way to run a country. It's no way to run a foreign policy, and especially in a world where so many players now have nuclear weapons. Excellent point, Paul. Thank you for the call. Leslie in Tecumseh, Michigan. Hey, Leslie, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom.
Hey, Leslie.
Calling. Can you hear me?
Just fine.
Oh, okay. Calling from beautiful Michigan. Our weather has been fantastic.
Oh, great. I miss Michigan.
Yes. We're really blessed. I think being a peninsula really helps us.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the reason I called is, I've been hearing the discussions about the Koreas. And a week or two ago, I probably heard it on Democracy Now!, that the new prime minister of South Korea wanted to try to set up a meeting with the North Koreans to develop some type of, rapprochement.
Yeah, he didn't just want to do that. He campaigned on that. That was the basis of how he got elected president or prime minister.
So what happened? I haven't heard of one single word more about
What happened was they reached out, the South Koreans reached out to the North and said, we would like to talk, we would like to set up a time and place for talks. And the North Koreans said, you guys are not, you're not the big boys here. You're not the ones who are calling the tune. That's the United States. And so we're not going to just talk to South Korea. We want to talk to the major powers involved in this thing. And the United States is saying, no, we're not going to talk to you because we're too cool.
Right. Well, it does seem like the three of the largest countries, Russia, China, and the U.S. now have weighed in.
Yeah.
And, these...
With a Security Council vote.
Yes, they are probably going to put a major hurting, on North Korea, but nothing will be solved,
Yeah.
I mean, when I think about the history, of this whole Korean, thing of the DMZ created by us, in the late 40s, early 50s. And, when you read about what happened in that war and how Pyongyang was left with one standing building due to, constant American bombing raids.
Yeah, North Korea was reduced to rubble, just reduced to rubble in the Korean War. And I would add, Leslie, and I think it's really important for Americans to remember the lessons of history.
Yeah.
In the early 1940s, as Japan was exercising their domination of the region, they'd invaded China. I believe the rape of Nanking had already happened, and Franklin Roosevelt made the decision to barricade the Straits of Malacca, which is a path between, as I recall, between Indonesia or Malaysia and the Asian continent. I think it's between Indonesia and the Malaysian. And the Asian continent. Louise and I have actually sailed through there. And by blocking the Straits of Malacca, what he was blocking was the ability of Japan to import oil from Europe, Russia, or even India, from that, from the Indian Ocean, from that part of the world. And that was about half of Japan's energy, that we just cut off with that blockade. And the Japanese response to that blockade was to blow up Pearl Harbor. There's a clear historical association between those two events, and to the point that Republicans at the time, and to this day, my dad, who did not like FDR, used to blame him for this, say, he purposely cut off Japan's oil supplies so that they would bomb us, so that we could get into World War II, so that he could get himself reelected and become, this famous president and all this kind of stuff. Well, we're essentially doing the same thing right now with North Korea. We are cutting their economy by 1/3 with these sanctions that were just voted in the UN. And is that going to provoke them to do the same thing essentially that Japan did in the 1940s and 1941 when we cut off their oil supplies in the Straits of Malacca and they bombed us in Pearl Harbor? It's a scary thing. Leslie, thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
From
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Welcome back to Thom Hartmann University Book Club. We're reading today from Screwed, The Undeclared War Against the Middle Class and What We Can Do About It. This is from Chapter 3, The Rise of the Corporatocracy, and it's in the middle of the chapter. It's the subchapter or subhead is Feudalist Takeover. America was not conceived of as a feudal state, F-E-U-D-A-L, feudalism being broadly defined as rule by the super rich. Our nation was created in large part in reaction against centuries of European feudalism. As Ralph Waldo Emerson said in his lecture titled The Fortune of the Republic, delivered on December 1st, 1863, quote, "We began with freedom. America was opened after the feudal mischief was spent. No inquisitions here, no kings, no nobles, no dominant church," end quote. The founding idea of America was that our country would not be ruled by a handful of very powerful rich men. America was founded as a country ruled by we the people. And for democracy to work, there had to be a strong and broad middle class. Even at our country's founding, there were some who who couldn't quite shake the idea that aristocracy was the way to go. As Jefferson warned in a letter in 1826 to William B. Giles, there are even those who, quote, "look to a single and splendid government of an aristocracy founded on banking institutions and moneyed corporations under the guise and cloak of their favorite branches of manufactures, commerce and navigation, riding and ruling over the plundered plowmen and beggared yeomanry, farmers and factory workers. This will be to them the next blessing of the monarchy, of their first aim and perhaps the surest stepping stone to it." The aristocracy that Jefferson feared rose first during the Gilded Age in the 1880s, when just a few companies seized control of much of America, including many of our elected officials. The major form of transportation and communication in those days was the railroads, and the railroads were owned by the Vanderbilts. The major form of energy then, as today, was oil, monopolized by John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Trust. And the major form of trade was in manufactured goods, which required factories, which in turn required steel, monopolized by Andrew Carnegie and his Carnegie Steel Company. These monopolists required ways to retain their hold on the money, so they turned to financiers like Jay Gould and John Pierpont Morgan, who set up large trusts for them. The Progressive Movement and then FDR beat back these monopolists with the Sherman Antitrust Act, the National Labor Relations Act, the Wagner Act, and other laws that regulated the game of business. Then Ronald Reagan, George Bush Sr., Bill Clinton, and George Bush Jr. came along and turned back the clock. Reagan fought the labor laws. Bush Sr. pushed for fast-track trade authority for the president. Clinton finally took down trade protections with NAFTA. And Bush Jr. put corporate executives into the driver's seat on government legislation. We've entered a new robber baron era. Today, the major form of communication is by phone and the internet in an area increasingly monopolized by the new AT&T, formerly SBC Singular AT&T. The major form of energy, oil, is controlled by just a handful of companies. Today's economic driver is the computer. Its software is monopolized by Microsoft, and its hardware is manufactured by a handful of oligarchs. Today, as in the Gilded Age, the rich are richer than ever. Forbes crows that in 2005, the rich got richer as the collective net worth of the United States' wealthiest climbed $125 billion to $1.13 trillion. That's greater than the gross domestic product of Spain or Canada. Bill Gates alone is worth $51 billion. 5 Walton family members, the owners of Walmart, made it into the top 10. Meanwhile, median household income fell for the 5th year in a row. In 1972, the median income for a person with a high school diploma was the equivalent of $42,600 in today's dollars. In 2002, the last year for which the National Center for Education Statistics compiled such numbers, a person with a high school diploma has a median income of $29,600. As the rich got richer, the rest of us got poorer, particularly what used to be of our middle class. The hallmark of the corporatocracy is monopoly. Fewer people holding more of the wealth, fewer companies holding more of the commons. The very competition that the conservatives claim to embrace is destroyed by the unrestrained growth of corporate interests. Big fish eat little fish over and over until there are no little fish left. And they eat the middle-sized fish until they're gone too. Look at the thoroughfares of any American city and ask yourself how many of the businesses here are locally owned. Instead of cash circulating within the local economy, at midnight every night a button is pushed and the local money from all over America is vacuumed away to Little Rock or Chicago or New York. And the corporate lords want more. Not content with their hold over the private sector, they want to take over the public sector too. When Jeb Bush was governor of Florida and cut a deal with Enron to privatize the Everglades, it diminished the power of the Florida government to protect a natural resource and enhanced the power and profitability of Enron. Similarly, when politicians argue for harsher sentencing guidelines and also advocate more corporate-owned prisons, they're enhancing the power and profits of one of America's fastest-growing and most profitable remaining domestic industries, privately owned prisons. The cons look at the government's pollution controls and see regulations that get in the way of their profits. They look at single-payer health care and see a threat to the pharmaceuticals industry's practice of price gouging. They look at Social Security and see an opportunity for more bonuses for Wall Street fat cats. And on it goes. The book is Screwed.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. If there is an upside to this whole Sturm und Drang around the possibility that Russia has, quote, hacked our election, and I think that there are considerable upsides to it, actually. I think the principal one is that it is allowing us to have a conversation that, frankly, the Democratic Party has not allowed us to have since 2002, or arguably even before that. But it was, you'll recall in 2000, when the election in Florida went south, the real reason why George W. Bush got within 500 votes of Al Gore to win, when all the exit polls and everything else showed that Al Gore was easily going to win Florida. The real reason that George W. Bush got
close enough that the Supreme Court could take the presidency away from Al Gore was that Jeb Bush, his brother, had ordered Katherine Harris, the Secretary of State, to remove something on the order of 54,000 African Americans, mostly African Americans, from the voting rolls in that state. Now, this is a process that is continuing across the United States on a regular basis. And this is like, seriously dangerous stuff. The way that our election has been hacked. There's a piece in today's National Post by Sari Horowitz. The headline pretty much says it all. Justice Department reverses position to support Ohio purging inactive voters in high-profile cases. The state of Ohio, under John Kasich, wants to throw a whole bunch of people off the voting rolls. Why? Because they mailed letters to them, and those people didn't send the letters back. Now, this used to be called caging, and the Republican Party used to operate under a court order forbidding them from doing it. Because the fact of the matter is, most of us, if we get something in the mail that looks like it's, junk mail, even from the government, we don't respond to it. And in particular, minority populations, people who are outside the United States, that would be active duty military mostly, very poor people, particularly if they're using, a collective mailbox or a post office box. There's a whole bunch of reasons why people don't necessarily always get their mail, or when they do, they're not inclined to respond to it. So the Republicans know that caging, this practice of mailing out things to registered voters, particularly in poor areas, particularly in black areas, particularly in urban areas, particularly elderly people, and particularly students, they know that mailing these things out to these people, they're going to get a high rate of returns as undeliverable. It doesn't mean the people are dead. It doesn't mean that they've moved. It means that, it's just the nature of their lives, right? It's just like people who live in cities where they've never had to own a car are less likely to have a driver's license. So here you've got Ohio trying to purge the vote, and the Justice Department under Obama, the Obama Justice Department, have been saying, no, you may not purge your voter rolls. At least on this basis. You have to demonstrate that these people have left the state, not guess that they've left the state because they're not replying to your junk mail. But now the official Trump Justice Department position is, go ahead. Ohio, John Kasich, throw them off the voting rolls. Especially in those big cities where you've got a lot of black people. Throw them off the voting rolls. Come on, do it. This has been the Republican position since the 50s. And they're going to continue with this. But it goes beyond that. What we saw in 2002, as a result of where I started this whole riff was in 2000, right, with the election, the selection of George W. Bush by the Supreme Court, what should have been the election of Al Gore. Because there was a wide variety of different voting systems in the state of Florida in the 2000 election, including the famous, butterfly chads and, or butterfly ballots that had chads that you couldn't push all the way through and all this. There were some systems that didn't work all that well or that were terribly confusing. You had thousands and thousands of people in elderly Jewish communities who, many of them Holocaust survivors who voted for Pat Buchanan, who's about as close to a Nazi as you can get in American politics and get on the ballot for president, told us that the system was either intentionally designed to mislead people and be confusing, which Republicans love, or just didn't work. So in 2002, we got this thing called the Help America Vote Act, which allocated around $5 or $6 billion federal dollars to give to the states to buy voting machines from a small handful of companies that were connected to Republican politics. So let's give billions of dollars to Diebold and ES&S and all these other companies. And now the question is, what's going on with these voting machines? Because what we started seeing after 2002, and we started seeing it right away, by the way, was something called redshift. In states using voting machines, particularly those states using exclusively voting machines with no paper trail, like Georgia, you started seeing, while the exit polls were saying Democrats were winning, the electronic voting machines were saying, no, Republicans are winning. In other words, the vote was shifting to the red into the Republican side. And a lot of us, I mean, I started writing about this in 2002. And you can find the articles. I was writing for Common Dreams back at the time, and you can find those articles online. And I was not alone in this. Bev Harris had started Black Box Voting. Brad Friedman doing brilliant work at bradblog.com, as he's been doing for years and years, all over this stuff. Greg Palast writing about it. You can read it at gregpalast.com. Greg Palast writing books about it, doing it. I mean, Greg Palast was the one who broke open the story when he was reporting for the BBC about how the Jeb Bush administration had thrown 54,000 African Americans out the voting rolls in Florida. He was the guy who broke that story. The whole world knew it. The BBC reported on it quite thoroughly. That report was never shown in the United States. No American media would pick it up after the election, which is mind-boggling. We're not even going to quote the BBC. But now it gets even worse. Now you've got a group of computer scientists who sat down and testified before Congress and in other places. This is some footage from C-SPAN talking about our vote and what happened with the vote and how the vote went down and all this sort of thing. Here's the first clip. While he's talking, I'll find the name of the guy. It's not on my one sheet. We'll be right back. Here he is.
I know America's voting machines are vulnerable because my colleagues and I have hacked them repeatedly. We've created attacks that can spread from machine to machine like a computer virus. Some say the fact that voting machines aren't directly connected to the internet makes them secure, but unfortunately this is not true. Before every election, they need to be programmed with races and candidates. If Russia infiltrated these election management computers, it could have spread a vote-stealing attack to vast numbers of machines. I know America's voting machines are vulnerable because my...
This was J. Alex Halderman, and it just started to repeat itself, I think, there. And this is where I started this thing out by saying, you know, if there's an upside to the whole Russia hysteria right now, it is this. It's that now we can have a conversation about how insecure our voting system is. Because I remember back in 2004 or 6, I think it was 2006, there was a group of us, talk show hosts, who came to Washington, D.C. to meet with some Democratic members of the House and Senate in a little forum where we were just talking about the issues of the day and, you know, how do we get stuff out there and whatnot. And a fairly high-profile Democrat said to us, said to me anyway, I think said in public to the whole group, the Democrats don't want to talk about the insecurity of electronic voting because it'll cause people to think that their vote might not be counted and therefore they won't show up to vote. And so the Democrats have been playing head in the sand here ever since 2002. And you talk to Democratic politicians and they will tell you off the record that they know that they've got a big problem, but they just haven't known what to do about it. How do you take this on without saying, hey, the Republicans are trying to steal the election? Keep in mind, Lyndon Johnson refused to out Richard Nixon's treason because he was afraid it would destroy the confidence of the American people in our voting system, in our electoral system. He thought it was best for the nation to go to his grave knowing that Richard Nixon had committed treason by collaborating with South Vietnam to postpone the peace process so that in 1968 Hubert Humphrey would not become president of the United States. The Democratic Party has a long tradition of being afraid, and it's not just of being afraid to call out the Republican crimes. The same thing in the 80s when Congress started investigating Iran-Contra. And they modified the law specifically to say you cannot look at anything that happened before 1981. In other words, you can't look at Reagan cutting a deal with the Iranians. So anyhow, that was the first clip. Here's the second part of this computer scientist. His name is J. Alex Halderman. He's the a professor of computer science and the director of the Center for Computer Security. Here he is.
We must start preparing now. First, we need to upgrade obsolete and vulnerable voting machines, such as paperless touchscreens, and replace them with optical scanners that count paper ballots. Second, we need to use the paper to make sure that the computer results are right. This is a common sense quality control. Lastly, we need to harden our systems against sabotage and raise the bar for attacks of all sorts by conducting comprehensive threat assessments and applying cybersecurity best practices to the design of voting equipment and the management of elections. But if we fail to act, I think it's only a matter of time until a major election is disrupted or stolen in a cyber attack.
See, and I'm saying that that's been going on since 2002, in a big way since 2004. But the Democratic Party has been afraid to talk about it because they don't want to call out the Republicans. And the Republicans, of course, just, make fun whenever the Democrats do talk about it. So now you can blame it on the Russians, right? It's like, hey, what the hell? It allows us at least to have that conversation. So I think that that's sort of the upside of all of this. And is it time now? Is it even possible that we can have a national conversation about the fact that what Thomas Paine characterized as the beating heart of democracy, the vote, was privatized in 2002, was turned over to for-profit corporations aligned with, both philosophically and financially, the Republican Party, and that those for-profit corporations and their voting machines have been delivering Republican politicians to us with some regularity ever since.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Blame it on the Russians, blame it on North Korea. I don't care who you blame it on. Let's just do something about it. Welcome back. Oh, let's see here. Gary, watching Free Speech TV in Rainier, Washington. Hey, Gary, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Well, I want to talk about Pence and Trump, but first I want to say that I'm not really worried about the North Korea thing. My biggest concern is the division that's happened in this country and the vote suppression in the future. I'm worried about us. Maybe I should worry about Korea more, but I've thought about this, and I know a lot of people that voted for Trump that normally voted Democrat, union workers and that, and they went on this, I'm going to bring jobs back, I'm going to get rid of NAFTA, and
I'm going to protect Social Security and Medicare.
Exactly. And that's what they voted on, and they don't pay a lot of attention to politics otherwise, the type that vote once every 4 years.
Yep.
But I think that Pence, and I've been through this too, and I've kind of made my decision today, but we'll see what happens down the road. But right now I think it would be better with Pence because he doesn't have that cult leader following. He's not the Pied Piper. And a lot of these people that voted for Trump, they're not religious right. They would not like what Pence is doing.
Right.
Even it's happening without Pence anyway, the people Trump's putting in.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that the Nixon-Ford is a good analogy to Trump-Pence. Ford was a very, very weak president. Of course, Nixon originally ran and was elected with Spiro Agnew as his vice president, the former, I believe, governor of Maryland. And Agnew had been taking bribes for years and years. That caught up with him while he was in the White House, and he had to resign and go back to New Jersey, as I recall, or Maryland, excuse me, and face bribery charges. But Jerry Ford then became the vice president, and Jerry Ford was perceived as being very weak and as bumbling and incapable of being much of a threat. A nice guy and all this kind of. I don't think Pence will even get the benefit of being viewed as a nice guy, because he's such a hardcore right wing, anti-woman, et cetera, misogynist and whatnot. But I think that you make a really, really good point, and it's a good one. Thanks a lot for the call, Gary. Excellent point. Greg in Devils Lake, North Dakota, watching Free Speech on DirecTV. Hey, Greg, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Tom. I was just thinking about this whole nuke scenario with North Carolina, if it triggers off, war and all that, and everybody, and
you mean North Korea?
Winter, and destroying mankind. And what about all the nukes that have been tested in the atmosphere already, like between Russia and U.S. over about 1,800 alone? Why hasn't that caused any?
Well, I think it's already that has probably caused a lot of cancer and an awful lot of thyroid disease. I mean, there's just.
But I was thinking about the winter. The whole.
Oh, the nuclear winter. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's. You could
You could probably make an argument that this is the planet, this is evolution's way of dealing with overpopulation, too. You know, it's the old Khrushchev comment, you know, when Khrushchev was asked, are there space aliens, do we have to worry about them? He said no. And they said, why? And he said, because any civilization that would reach the point where they could travel interstellar space would also have developed the equivalent of nuclear weapons and destroyed themselves. So maybe the nuclear weapons will stop us from destroying the Earth with a Permian extinction kind of event by stopping us from burning all these fossil fuels, because they, nuclear war destroys civilization.
Hi there, I'm Marie with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving donations, volunteering, or spreading the word about Free Speech TV, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to exist. And for that, I want to say thank you. Now you can give to the network powered by the people by donating an unwanted or used vehicle through our Vehicles of Change program. If you have an old car, RV, or even a motorcycle, Free Speech TV can use it to grow and thrive. You can make a bigger difference in supporting Free Speech TV by giving an old car. It's a great way to support the network without having to dig into your bank account. Just call 877-378-8669 and ask for more information about Vehicles of Change. Again, the number to call is 877-378-8669. If it has a VIN, we'll take it in. Thank you.
Wendy in Mount Vernon, Washington. Hey, Wendy, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi. Well, I was just wondering, for voting, is there a way to get the paper ballot for everywhere? You know, is it something that, like, with a petition, or something that the public does in order to get the I don't know, paper ballots just seem to be.
In other words, how do we come up with a national standard that is safe? And if I'm understanding your question correctly?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it would be a way for the Democratic Party or for grassroots groups to go around, maybe to the rural areas, ahead of time, but to go to places that maybe people don't get out much, or just to get them more involved, but also to help them with the paper ballot.
Yeah, I can tell you, Wendy, Louise and I lived in Oregon for 5 or 6 years, and we voted by mail. You can't, there are no polling places in Oregon. You have to vote by mail. And as a result of that, Oregon has one of the highest voter participation rates in the United States. It's easy to vote. It's easy to register. It's a very, very straightforward process. And
is that everywhere in Oregon?
Yeah, it's statewide. But the thing is, the Constitution gives to the states. Well, it doesn't specifically give it to the states, but it doesn't give it to the federal government. So the theory is, and the 10th Amendment, is what's used to define this broadly, is that the states come up with their own ways of running their elections. Now, the reason that the framers of the Constitution put that in there was so that the southern slave states could continue to exclude African Americans from voting. And so, once again, we're dealing with
and that's still continuing.
Yeah, we're still dealing with the legacy of slavery here in the United States. But this is why there are no national standards, and there's very few states that even have statewide standards. And
how did they
go ahead.
change those in those states? I mean,
this is where I think at the individual state level, I mean, we've seen in Washington State, in Colorado, and I think in maybe a couple of other states, vote by mail become widely available as the result of citizen activists.
Yeah.
And we need more of that. Whether it could be done at a federal level, certainly it can't be done as long as Republicans are in control, because they have the same worldview that the slaveholding South did, which is that there's large portions of the population that they do not want to be able to easily vote. But
how do we help, like in other states, help the public? I mean, it seems like if they're up against their own state government, isn't there a way for those citizens? I mean, is there a way to help them?
Sure. Yeah. Encourage your friends who are in, whatever state they're in. Encourage everybody you know to get involved in their local Democratic Party. This is an issue that the Democratic Party has spoken out about. Not as aggressively as I would like, but they have spoken out about it, and they have led the charge for things like vote by mail. So I think, that's a great start. Wendy, thank you for the call.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So how do we deal with voting? Who's more dangerous, Trump or Pence? What are the big issues facing America? More of that right after.
And welcome back to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. We're reading today from Last Hours of Humanity, Warming the World to Extinction. We fight wars all over. This is from the last chapter, chapter 6, titled Staving Off Extinction. We fight wars all over the world for oil, and we don't even need it. That in and of itself is insane. But when you look at a 250 million year old piece of sedimentary rock and see that it's virtually barren of fossilized life forms, you realize that this is a hell of a lot more important than whether or not our country is going to fight stupid wars in far-off lands so the oil companies and the Koch brothers can continue to get rich. This is about the survival of life on this planet, at least as we know it. To hold back extinction, the human race must immediately limit carbon emissions. There are a number of ways to do this. To start with, governments around the world can simply set a limit on carbon emissions and begin fining businesses that pollute beyond that cap. If we want to make it more politically palatable and throw in some profit for the banksters who own so many of our politicians, we could also let businesses and banks set up an exchange and trade carbon credits. Businesses can buy the right to pollute or sell the consequences of their good behavior. In that way, the banksters get to skim a piece off the top, just like they've managed to do with pretty much everything else. This is our best chance to stave off extinction. However, it's politically impossible, at least for now. Although as the consequences of global warming further manifest themselves, political will for a hard cap will undoubtedly build, just like it did with sulfur dioxide that caused acid rain back in the 1980s. It's rarely discussed in the press, but President George Herbert Walker Bush successfully pushed through a cap-and-trade program for sulfur dioxide, which radically curbed acid rain. It's to buy humanity time in the short term, we may have to settle for a more modest proposal, such as a carbon tax. The concept is simple. Put a price on pollution. Under a carbon tax system, a business would pay, for example, $20 for every metric ton of carbon that they spew into the air. As of 2013, 33 countries and 18 smaller jurisdictions around the world have already put some sort of a price on carbon. In February of 2013, China, the world's largest polluter of carbon, announced plans to implement a carbon tax themselves. And the European Union runs a carbon cap-and-trade system. In 2010, Congress nearly passed a comprehensive cap-and-trade law that would have kept carbon emissions at a rational level and required businesses that wanted to pollute beyond the limits to buy carbon credits on the market from other businesses that were polluting below the level. Though that measure died by a Republican filibuster in the Senate, elsewhere around the world, carbon taxes are flourishing. Alongside the EU's cap-and-trade system, several other European nations are also taxing carbon. They include the nations of Scandinavia, the UK, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and Ireland. Other like-minded countries include Costa Rica, which funnels tax revenues from carbon polluters to indigenous communities to help fight deforestation. South Africa, where new auto sales include a carbon tax, and full-scale carbon tax across most other industries have already been implemented. And India, which has a carbon tax of 50 rupees per ton on coal produced or imported into India. South Korea and Japan have also passed carbon tax measures. Several provinces in Canada have carbon taxes. And here in the United States, there are local carbon taxes in San Francisco, Boulder, and Montgomery County, Maryland. While quietly, business leaders and even Republican lawmakers are coming around to the idea of extending a nationwide carbon tax. For a moment, consider exactly what big oil is doing to our planet and how much money they are making in the process. The 5 biggest oil companies in the world, ExxonMobil, Chevron, Royal Dutch Shell, BP, and ConocoPhillips, dump roughly 1 billion pounds of carbon into our air every single day. A modest carbon tax that would cut their daily profits by about $10 million and still total for them a staggering $332 million in profits every day is something they can afford as one part of a comprehensive energy policy. It's the bare minimum that carbon polluters should be paying, considering the damages they're inflicting on our planet. Pollution costs, like global warming, are called externalities. These externalities also include the medical costs of increased asthma and cancer care associated with 1 billion pounds of pollution being burned into the air above our communities every single day. They include the costs of ecological devastation caused when oil rigs explode in the Gulf of Mexico or tankers run aground and spill open off the coast of Alaska. They also include the military costs of deploying armies around the world to ensure that the oil spigots in hostile regions keep flowing and the shipping lanes remain open. And they include the costs associated with climate change, costlier storms, rising sea levels, flooding, and agricultural devastation. Carbon polluters themselves pay for few, if any, of these externalities, but instead they try to pass the bill along to all of us affected by their pollution. That needs to change to prevent disaster. When the day comes that businesses know pollution is at their expense, they will begin to reduce their carbon emissions. Capping carbon levels alone won't work. Research out of the MIT Global Change Institute assumed a $20 tax per ton of carbon pollution, increasing 4% every year, and found that it would only modestly curb emissions. This carbon tax scenario falls well short of even the White House's goal of cutting carbon emissions by 80% by 2050. And it would come nowhere close to staving off the projected temperature increases that could take our planet over the extinction tipping point. So a carbon tax needs to be part of a broader plan that not only eliminates incentives for the use of carbon-based fuels, but altogether phases them out and replaces them with new, cleaner energy alternatives. This will require massive government investment in research and development. It's basically calling for a new Manhattan Project. The book is The Last Hours of Humanity, Warming the World to Extinction by Thom Hartmann. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Jeremiah in Coalport, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jeremiah, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, you want to know what to do about voting?
Yeah.
I think we need to undo the nonpartisan commission in California that draws the congressional districts and gerrymander it to the advantage of the Democrats, because that's the biggest electoral prize, and we need to balance out the gerrymandering in other states.
California already is largely Democratic. I mean, there's a few Republican members of Congress from California, but the vast majority of their congressional delegation is Democratic. The state assembly and the state senate are both controlled by Democrats. The governorship is, Jerry Brown is a Democrat.
Well, yes, but if we gerrymandered it more, I mean, I think we could possibly pick up more seats. But also, there's a case in Texas regarding gerrymandering, and I think if you have gerrymandering in California and gerrymandering in Texas, that they both can make their way to the Supreme Court, and they would have to decide, okay, are we going to do away with gerrymandering, or are we going to allow it?
Well, the one argument in favor of what you're saying, Jeremiah, is that if only Republicans are aggressively gerrymandering and successfully gerrymandering, which is not the case, but it's largely the case, and it may be perceptually the case. If only Republicans are doing it and it goes to the Supreme Court, Neil Gorsuch, who is a partisan Republican right-wing crazy, beyond even Scalia, and John Roberts, of course, a total corporate Republican toady, they're going to simply say, gerrymandering is just fine. It's helping the Republicans. We're not going to stop it. But if Democrats were successful in gerrymandering in a way that a state where the majority of the votes actually went Republicans, instead had a larger set of Democrats in their congressional delegation, as the reverse of that is the actual case in places like, or something close to the reverse of that is the actual case in places like Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Pennsylvania, where the vote is roughly 50-50, but the representation in Congress is more like 7-4, in favor of Republicans. Pennsylvania, as I recall. If that were to happen, if it looked like the Democrats were doing it successfully, then I think that the partisans on the Supreme Court might be more inclined to say, screw it, we'll throw the whole thing out and let's have the whole country do it the way California does.
But there's also the problem of the Democratic Party on the one hand saying we want clean government, we want to do away with gerrymandering, we want honest lines drawn so that we have true representation in Congress, and then on the other hand saying, hey, we can gerrymander, let's do it. So, you know, there's kind of a moral issue and a political issue. But I get what you're saying, Jeremiah. It's a fascinating one. We'll see how this plays out. Thanks for the call. Evan in Kansas City, Missouri. Hey, Evan, what's on your mind today?
Hi, this is Stephen. Yeah, I was wanting to talk to you about voter registration in California.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just interesting because I was listening to your show and you were talking about the possibility that Russians could have actually hacked the actual voting machines. And I never hear anything on this type of show about like what happened in California with the millions of illegal immigrants there who actually have incentive to go and illegally vote, and how easy it is to get voter registration in that state.
Yeah. You know how easy it is to walk into a store, Evan? Or Stephen, excuse me?
You say what?
You know how easy it is to walk into a store?
I do.
You ever been inclined to take something from that store, stick it in your pocket, and walk out without paying for it?
Not personally, no. But
why not?
I think it would be easy to do so, for sure.
Yeah, but most of us don't because we don't want to go to jail. It's the same reason why people who are not documented citizens don't vote in U.S. elections, because you can go to jail for 2 to 5 years, depending on the state. Nobody is illegally voting. It ain't happening, Evan. Don't even try it. David in Morristown, Florida. Hey, David, what's on your mind?
Hey, if we want to cure voting, what we need to do is make it a national holiday.
I agree.
4th of July. Let everybody, I can see, okay, if you're in jail, then maybe you shouldn't be able to vote. But once you get out, you've paid your dues. If you're walking the streets, you need to be able to vote.
I agree.
And that's what I think they're afraid of.
I think
everybody and their vote. Do away with the Electoral College.
Yep.
The last 2 Republican presidents were there by crook.
Yeah, they did not win the majority vote. George W. Bush and Donald Trump both lost. They're both popular vote losers.
I live here in Florida. I heard Al Gore say on Bill Maher the other day that he won Florida. He knew he won Florida.
Oh, he did?
Do you think if it would have been turned around and George Bush would have been president, and even on January or February, whenever it was figured out, they wouldn't have marched his ass right out of the White House, excuse my language.
Yeah. No, I think you may well be right, David. And I would encourage you to go back and look at the Supreme Court case, Bush v. Gore. When George Bush, when his lawyers sued Al Gore to stop the recount in Florida that the Florida Supreme Court had ordered, which would have turned the vote over to Al Gore, by the way, because a year later, you know, this consortium of newspapers, the New York Times, the Associated Press, USA Today, and I think Newsweek, they actually had a couple of trailer tractors full of every single ballot from Florida, took them up to New York and spent a year counting them. It was published in November of 2001 in the New York Times and the USA Today and others, and they found that had every vote actually been counted, Al Gore would have easily walked away with the state of Florida by any measure, So, go ahead.
Didn't the Supreme Court say it would do irreparable harm?
Yes, in fact, that's where I was going with that thought, David. I'm sorry, I got derailed. And that, if you read Bush v. Gore, the reason why they sued was they said that if the ballot is actually counted in Florida, counting the votes will cause irreparable harm to plaintiff George W. Bush. Nobody considered the irreparable harm to defendant Al Gore, right? It was all about and the Supreme Court, William Rehnquist, writing for the majority in the Supreme Court, said, yes, we agree that if the vote is counted in Florida, it will cause irreparable harm to George W. Bush. And it sure as heck would have. David, thank you for the call. Laura in Chicago. Hey, Laura, what's on your mind?
Yeah, Tom, thank you for being so clear today on your show about the long history of significant election fraud in many states and localities in this country. And there's on our Facebook page, Clean Count Cook County, we have a resource for people because we recommend that citizens gather in their counties in their election jurisdictions. That's where you can really get, where you can really push for a change in the election mechanics, you know, the actual machines and things.
Right.
And that resource, which is on the top post of Clean Cook County, walks everybody through. What machines do you have? What are your audits like? Are your audits adequate? There's all sorts of links for people to follow, plus at least two very significant background. Code Red, a book written by Jonathan Simon on this subject. He's a Harvard statistician. And then Democracy Lost, the documentation of the fraud against Bernie in the Democratic primaries. So,
Laura, is this, you said clean election Cook County dot something?
Nope, it is Clean Count Cook County. What we want, a clean count in Cook County.
Is that a Facebook page?
Yeah, it's a Facebook page.
I see. Okay, got it.
We're getting up a website. We're getting up a website. We're in the middle of the process of that.
Okay.
So there's this top post, and it walks people through. And that is where you really have a lot of power, at the local level. And most counties are deciding their state laws that involve, you know, elections, but they usually just give guidelines. And then the counties are actually deciding what machines they're buying and their processes.
Very interesting. Okay, Clean Count, Cook County, over on Facebook. Laura, thank you, and good on you for your activism. Thank you for the call. We will be back. It is 43 and a half minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
More of your calls right after. And welcome back. David, watching Free Speech TV in Searcy, Arkansas. Do I have that right, David?
Yes, you do.
Great. What's on your mind today?
Okay, voting and all that goes with it. I agree with the gentleman that called earlier about having it as a national holiday, getting rid of the Electoral College. And as far as voting machines and stuff like that, my idea for a voting machine is much like a credit card, but like on your driver's license, because I believe that everybody must vote. So if you want a driver's license, you got to vote. I know that doesn't solve.
But what about people who are disabled and can't drive, or people who are elderly and can't drive?
I understand, Tom, that does not cure all the problems. This is just an overlay of some problems, and others can be fixed as they come up. As that. Have a mobile a truck that comes to an area, takes your picture, gives you the voter card.
Right.
You swipe it like you would a credit card. This registers you that you voted. You vote, and out comes the readout like you would at a grocery store if you buy groceries with a credit card.
Yeah.
It registers. You get out a receipt that gives you your what you paid for, but in this case, who you voted for.
Yeah.
And then,
you know, if Republicans would fund these trucks to go into communities and help people get the necessary identification to vote, and make it widely available and make it free, and then, you know, much of my objection would be withdrawn. But the fact of the matter is that voter ID in this country is a solution looking for a problem. There is no problem of people who are not legitimate voters voting. There simply is no problem of that. And so
my goal on this was to simply, not necessarily to use the word force would be a little overlaid there, but simply get people to vote.
Yeah.
If you can't get a driver's license because you don't vote, well, you're going to vote.
Yeah. Well, you know, the way they do it in Australia is when you vote, you register essentially through your equivalent of a Social Security number. And that's how they know that you voted, because it's tied to your tax number, you know, your income taxes.
And at the end of the year, there's a fine for you if you didn't vote on your income tax. So you're actually tying your citizenship, your income taxes, and your vote all together. And that seems like a system that is a little more practical.
Heard of that. It does seem like a very good system. And I mean, you know, and if you do the holiday for the election, have a 3-day, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Sure.
You can have, I don't want to say, have people there that can validate, you know, your citizenship by one means or another, in which you would go up, get validated if you didn't have a driver's license. If you had no ID at all, you can be validated there at the polling place.
Yeah. The problem is that the Republicans have caused us to hate and suspect each other. You know, it's like they've created this fear, this environment of fear and paranoia, literally out of whole cloth. Just like they did with black people for hundreds of years. It wasn't Republicans then, but it was ideologically the exact same people, the bigots. And I mean, they used to be in the Democratic Party. Now they're in the Republican Party. But it's the same thing. David, thank you for the call. We'll be back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Andrew in Boynton Beach, Florida. Hey, Andrew, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I called to weigh in about the Trump v. Pence thing.
Okay.
But actually, an interesting aside, I'm in Palm Beach County, and the first election I ever voted in was Bush v. Gore, 2000.
Oh, my.
So that's kind of set the tone for my experience with American democracy.
Okay. So what are your thoughts on Trump v. Pence?
Well, actually, now that I heard one guy say, you know, we could roll back anything that Trump did, Pence did while he's in there, and Trump is the bigger threat. But that's just not true. I mean, these people are out to steal all this money.
Yep.
Medicaid, public education, Social Security, and once that is gone, it's gone.
Plus our public lands. Look at all the national monuments that they want to slice and dice and sell off to the fossil fuel industry.
It's really not. I mean, there's no way to roll back money that's not there anymore, and that's not ours anymore.
Yeah.
With theft, you can't roll back theft.
Yep. I agree.
And also,
but see, Trump is doing that anyway right now with Ryan Zinke. You know.
Yeah, really. Thanks, Alaska. Gee. But, yeah, I think that was it.
Okay. All right. Andrew, thank you. Excellent points all. I appreciate the call. Chris in Steger, Illinois. Hey, Chris, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. So just wanted to weigh in on the Trump v. Pence thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so personally, I believe that, you know, Pence will be just slightly better, and here's the reason. I think that Pence is, you know, more of an establishment guy. Okay, I think he's very conservative. I totally disagree with his views, but he doesn't want to totally disrupt government. Trump is, on the other hand, is advocating really destabilizing the whole system. I mean, you know, if you even think, and I think Steve Bannon, you know, is really behind all of this, because Bannon is on record saying that he, you know, wanted to deconstruct government. Right. So Trump is after the institutions. I mean, you know, the very things that, you know, keep us stable in this economy. You know, and you mentioned things like, you know, feudalism and, you know, the role that, you know, the aristocrats are having in the oligarchs. I think all of this is really playing out. And if you think about Bannon, you know, Bannon is terrible on social issues, being, you know, he's, you know, kind of the whole white supremacy thing. But even on fiscal issues, he's a Wall Street guy. You know, he's right. Like a Goldman Sachs banker or something like that. So, you know, I think, you know, when I weigh the two, I have to say that Pence is a little bit better, even though, you know, I think both are terrible. But, you know, what
he's a little bit less worse.
They're talking about really destabilizing the whole system.
Yeah, that's an important point, Chris. It's a well-made point and an important one. Thanks for weighing in. Sasha in Kent, Washington. Hey, Sasha, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi. Well, I want to weigh in on the Pence versus 45, but I've got to say, that seems kind of ephemeral. That voting segment you did was just so substantive. You really captured how our stolen elections are happening, and our representative, Adam Smith, just recently spoke and stood up for the fact that the elections are being stolen. And it was very refreshing to see. But back on the topic, I think I can, in 30 seconds, I can outline this because it's kind of from the Twilight Zone. I have a different take. First of all, this nightmare that we are living in, I think we needed it. I think it's good for us. And first 45 is one of the best recruiting factors for the progressive movement that you could have asked for. Yep. People are getting active who would not have, maybe. That's my one thought. Now, here, let's say I believe the Republican Party has planned the impeachment at their time and at their convenience. So say we last until 2018 and Ryan loses his election. We take the Senate and maybe get a better edge in the House. And then McConnell, the master manipulator, decides to do the impeachment then and puts in Ryan for the president.
Wait a minute. He's going to impeach Pence as well as Trump?
Yeah, there's enough dirt there that they could find Pence has lied, you know? I mean,
yeah, but they're not going to. I mean, the Republican Party is not going to impeach Mike Pence. He is classic Republican, total toady to the billionaires.
Oh, I like my plan.
Yeah, I like your plan too, but I don't think it's practical. But it's good points all. Sasha, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Thanks for your contribution to our conversation. Eric in driving through Alabama. Hey, Eric, what's on your mind?
So that's me?
That's you.
Oh, okay. I prefer Trump to stay in power because Pence kind of scared me not domestically, but both of them are the same domestically pretty much. For foreign affairs, because Trump don't want to get into no real war with nobody. He don't mind talking trash. But Pence, I got a feeling he would actually get in a real war. You know.
You think Pence is more likely to get us in a real war, whereas Trump is all bluster? That's an interesting analysis. And Eric, your phone is pretty hard to understand, but thank you. Good points. Deanna in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Deanna, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Hey, listen, voting by mail got me to start voting.
Yeah.
And
that's great.
I voted ever since. It's easy. You have 30 days to decide and read your manual. And also, they're starting to register you now at DMV.
Yeah. And Willamette Week publishes a great voter's guide.
Yeah. And, I mean, it's unbelievable. And I believe that Pence is very, very dangerous. And I wouldn't want Pence in office at all.
Yeah. Okay. Deanna, thank you. Thank you for sharing your perspective with us. Catherine in Las Vegas. Hey, Catherine.
Hi, thanks. So I called about Trump-Pence. Just on a side note, when you were talking about Kasich in Ohio, I'm not sure if you're aware he was doing that mail scheme because my parents were two of the people that were being purged from the voter rolls in Ohio this past election.
Oh, really? So he's been doing active caging in Ohio.
He did it in Ohio. There were something like almost 1 million people, and the people that did not respond were forced to vote by provisional ballot, and the provisional ballots were never counted. So just so you're aware of that.
Yeah.
So, but as far as Trump-Pence goes, there's something really more dangerous and insidious going on with Trump that needs to be put to an end, which the FCC we already know is getting rid of net neutrality. The guy who's in charge of it, that's his singular goal. Sinclair Media Group it looks like Trump's going to change the rules.
They just did.
That they can,
the FCC changed.
They can get to 80% of the households through local TV stations. In the meantime, Bannon and Breitbart and Miller and all of these ultra right wing, so right wing that Fox News does not consider them an ally but an adversary, are taking over the media while simultaneously Trump is eliminating fact and truth and basic understanding that we all have.
That's kind of a Venezuela situation.
Right. And without knowledge and understanding and fact and truth, how can you have democracy? And that's the thing that is more dangerous than any policy that they're going to put in place, and that's the thing that needs to be stopped, is they are creating a state propaganda network.
Oh, Catherine? Where did Catherine go? Okay. All right, Catherine, thank you very much for the call. I appreciate it. We're running out of time here. But I get what you're saying, and I totally agree with it. Thank you all so much for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. If you haven't seen Al Gore's new movie, An Inconvenient Sequel, let me encourage you to go check it out. Louise and I watched it on Saturday, and we're very impressed. It's a great movie. So in the meantime, get out there, get active. Peg, you're it. Democracy starts with you. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.